So God stumbled and made a mistake. I appeared before him and he told me that he had accidentally killed me. As an apology, he offered me reincarnation in another world. God asked me if I was bothered by how ridiculous it all sounded. I said no, because I had no regrets about that life. Besides, I want to live a good second life. And then God told me that he was glad that I had decided so. God really couldn't return me to the same world where I died. As a gift, he promised me something when I was reborn. God said that there would be 3 abilities that I would have to use wisely. I had no idea what they might be, so I just thanked him. He also told me at the end that he hoped that my new life would be full of happiness. That is how he was reborn as the strongest peasant. Opening his eyes for the first time, the hero heard the girl's voice, which addressed him as her brother. From the very beginning, it was difficult to see anything. The eyes needed to adapt after the resurrection. In front of the hero stood a little girl named Chappelle. She immediately asked her brother if he was sick by any chance because he had slept too long. The boy gradually began to get out of bed, saying that he was fine and that he had slept for a long time because he had a good dream. Chappelle smiled and said that she was glad in that case. The boy began to put on his long boots and began to remember how long ago it was. As God promised, the boy received a second life and was reincarnated in a new world. In the world he once existed in, the man was a simple office clerk whose life was as boring as he was. He died at the age of 40. Now he was reincarnated as a young peasant named Weibel, but everyone called him by his short name, Belle. The boy looked at his little sister who continued to smile. It's time to introduce her, a hardworking girl who was Belle Chappelle's sister and was only 2 years younger than her brother. The girl was almost always as cheerful as she is now. However, in this world there was no gas, no electricity, no running water. Everything was arranged as if it were the rural hinterland of that world. So we got up every day and did certain things. Belle was just about to go outside, waving his hand to his little sister. It may seem that life here is far from sweet, but now Belle will show everything. Stepping outside, a fresh wind began to blow on the young man. Belle said that the weather today was just great, as if it hadn't rained yesterday. He really liked living here. After looking around, the boy realized that he needed to do some work before going to breakfast. Looking at his father's grave, Belle also told him that he was going to work. At that moment, someone else said good morning to the boy. Belle turned around with a smile and saw his mother walking with a basket. The woman said that their field was so fertile that it was overgrown with weeds. Belle laughed and then said that it was no big deal since the guy could bring some goats there who would definitely enjoy such a snack. Looking at the animals, Belle remembered something. The boy thought that if the weather was so good, he should take the wounded goat out, because the poor thing had never left the barn yet. Entering the barn, the boy approached the goat and examined its hoof. After stroking the animal, the boy said that in a little while everything would pass. Belle thought to himself that at such moments his abilities were irreplaceable. God said that something like eye lasers would be too much for this world, so he gave him 3 simple and convenient abilities. The first of these was superhuman strength. Belle knows that it sounds simple, but in practice he could easily lift weights that reached up to 5 tons. And as a bonus, the guy was also very resilient. After picking up the wounded goat, Belle dragged it to the field so that it could carefully begin to move and recover. Someone shouted at the boy that his strength was simply amazing. He turned and saw a girl who was also running towards him and waving her hand, smiling widely. It was Emerald. Belle asked when the girl had managed to return, to which she said that last night. This green-eyed wonder is Emerald, an adventurer in training. The girl thought about it, saying that she had fun, but she didn't think it was good to become an adventurer. Afterwards, she smiled and fixed her hair, telling Belle that the trip had been great, if that's the case, overall. She also thanked the guy for the tools he had given her with him. Belle replied that he was always happy to help. Emerald came closer and said that if the boy hadn't realized yet, her journey had not been in vain. Then she turned her gaze downwards. The girl looked at Belle with displeasure and asked why he treated her like a child, even though he was younger than the girl. Belle thought for a moment and then began to laugh. Smiling widely, the boy said that it was his mistake, because he would never have thought that the crybaby Emerald had now become a diligent lady. The girl began to get angry, telling Belle to stop remembering this. The boy thought that even knowing that he was 15 years old in this world, his previous memories remained with him, so his peers seemed like younger sisters to him. Although, if you consider the age, where Belle was 40 before, then they could be called daughters. In his past life, he was not married, so he did not understand much about all this. Afterwards, the guy thought that it would be better for him to go home. After a little work, he could start breakfast, because the feeling of hunger was already rolling in. Chappelle immediately greeted her brother when he returned. Belle, looking at the table, said that everything looked incredibly delicious. Mom said that Chappelle tried very hard for him. Also, when Mom came closer, she asked about Touta, suggesting that Belle could have seen him when he was outside. The guy asked in response whether the guy had returned home or not. Then a little boy appeared behind the door, holding a strap from a quiver of arrows in his hand. His mother immediately paid attention to him, telling the boy to quickly go wash his hands and sit down at the table. Touta decided to show off right away, lifting a small hair by its ears. Belle smiled, praising the boy, and then said that they could cook it later. Mom stroked the boy's head, saying that he would probably grow up to be a hunter since he already had such a passion for this craft. Touta, by the way, was Belle's younger brother, and in addition, the main supplier of meat to the house. Chappelle, stirring her breakfast in a saucepan, turned to her brothers and reminded them that their warehouse was now completely full of meat. Belle said they could give some to Grandma from the drugstore. Touta raised his head to his older brother and told him that Belle promised to teach the boys magic today. The child just wanted to make sure that his older brother remembered this, but the boy's look said otherwise. But Touta honestly admitted that he had forgotten. Then Chappelle immediately appeared, put her hands on her waist and shouted that Belle was always forgetting everything. With a smile on his face, the guy apologized and suggested that they eat first. Belle thought that magic was really popular in this world. The remaining two abilities that the boy received from God were related to it. But the world that Belle appeared in, where both adults and children could use magic, his ability was very useful. It was, in fact, unlimited magic. After using it, the guy shook off his hands, which touched the ground, and said with a smile that this is exactly what he wanted to do now. Touta and Chappelle were standing very close. The children, seeing how the boy deftly controlled his abilities, rejoiced, shouting that his brother's magic, as always, was simply amazing. Belle demonstrated how to make a fence out of stone. Touta looked ahead for a long time and then smiled at his older brother and, looking into his eyes, said that when he grows up, he really wants to become like Belle. Belle smiled shyly, thinking that these words were probably the best words an older brother could ever hear. Belle thought Touta was a real cutie. The children began to beg Belle to teach them how to use this magic. The boy told them to try it themselves because they learn from mistakes. After that, Chappelle shouted at him to give them at least some hint. Belle thought about it and then said that he thought that imagination control was a powerful assistant in this matter. The children were a little confused about what their brother was talking about and continued to wait for more instructions. When they realized that this was all Belle wanted to say, they began to ask how to feel in control. Belle covered his face with his hand, realizing that he didn't even know how to explain it more simply. The children continued to ask about what this control was. Touta added that his brother was speaking too complicatedly. Belle realized that they didn't even understand the word control. After that, the boy began to think about how he could explain magic to children in a different and simpler way. And now Belle had an idea. The guy raised his index finger and then said that first Touta and Chappelle should imagine anything in their heads. The boy said very cheerfully that first you just need to try, which greatly encouraged the children. Touta and Chappelle began to stretch out and cross their arms, making different gestures. Chappelle began to attract the attention of her older brother, telling him to look at her. The girl said that she had fire and ice in her hands. Belle immediately realized that she had a talent for magic. Touta's results were much worse. The boy, seeing how skillfully his sister managed, looked at his weak lightning and wind with sad eyes. Belle thought while scratching his chin that Touta was also only 10 years old and he had already reached this stage. Belle thought that he was also a real genius, and it seemed like they had a large amount of mana. Belle knew he had learned magic pretty quickly, but not as much as they had. Afterwards, the boy thought he couldn't teach them anything else. The children stood quietly and waited for Belle to give them further instructions. The boy thought that they had very cute faces, and then said that he congratulated them because they had passed the test. Afterwards, the boy raised his index finger up again and told them that the next step was imagination control. The magic Belle used was the basics, but if you add a little imagination, it would change everything. Now Belle wanted to show them an example. The guy began to run his finger through the air, demonstrating fire magic, but in his head he imagined light, so a beam stretched behind his finger. Then he looked at Chappelle and said that the girl would have her own homework. She had to make a square with the help of light magic. The girl raised her hand and said that everything would be done. Afterwards, Belle turned his gaze to his older brother, who was not as pleased as Chappelle, but despite all this, Belle told him that the boy must master the whirlwind. Then, to cheer him up, Bell decided to demonstrate the spell, saying that if Touta could do it, he could do it like this, and then launched a whirlwind. Touta watched with wide eyes, and then said that he would try very hard. Bell smiled and told the boy not to overdo it and not to push himself too hard. Afterwards, the older brother turned around and waved his hand, saying that they were done for the day, because Bell still had some work to do. Chappelle, inspired by what she had seen, told Touta that they could train together. By training in this way and trying to recreate what you have in your head, you learn the local magic itself. Anyone who cannot afford a grimoire seeks their own path in magic. Bell thought that he still had a lot of free time, so the guy could have fun with magic, doing something from his past life. Suddenly, Bell remembered that he had long wanted to make a whirlwind from his favorite anime. There were also spells that didn't require mana at all. For Bell, this was the third gift from God, a barrier of magic. The guy imagined it in his head, and soon a glowing cube appeared on his hand. This barrier that God gave him could transform into anything, so it was without a doubt the best ability the guy had. But, with all this ability was also the most risky. Bell knew that it would be bad if someone tried to use it, so Bell didn't tell anyone about it except his family. Now Bell was in the pantry, when suddenly he heard someone coming down to him. It was Chappelle, who announced that lunch was ready and they were waiting for Bell so that they could all sit down at the table together. Bell thanked his sister for reminding him, and then took some firewood and a barrel, with which he began to climb up. The boy asked his sister to make a deer stew for his grandmother, so it needed to be softer. Afterwards, the boy said that 2 portions were needed, because he would take the rest to his uncle, the merchant. After dinner, Bell thanked everyone for the food and said that he would be back before sunset. Before leaving, Bell turned to the children and said that if they saw a monster near the village, they would have to take it out with magic. The boy loaded all the goods onto his cart and then went to the center of the village, which was also called Colonia. It was far from the mountain where Bella's family lived. That was the reason they used the cart to get there. The boy looked around, smiled, and thought that he liked riding the cart in this weather. As he rode past the fields, Bell waved at a girl named Sallyberry. He told her she looked beautiful, to which she responded by telling him that the young man had a certain impudence. Bell smiled even wider and said that he was born that way, asking not to take his words seriously. Then Bell explained that Sallyberry was the most refined girl in the village, the local princess. Sallyberry climbed onto the guy's cart, saying that she would go with him if he was moving to the colony. Since she had already sat down, Bell decided to catch her out, saying that she had not even waited for an answer about his direction. The girl turned to him with a confused look, telling Bell not to bother his head. She also said that the guy must be lonely, so she would accompany him. Bell continued walking, thinking that this girl wasn't bad, but he couldn't get along with her. Then the guy turned around and said that he remembered something. The guy smiled and said that Emerelle had returned back to the village. Bell also said that he had met her this morning and added that the girl had not changed at all. The girl thought about it, quietly saying only, The guy heard it and asked why she shortened her friend's name like that, but she immediately got distracted, thinking that her hair had split ends. Bell turned back and looked gloomily at the road, thinking that the girl's reaction was inexplicably strange to him. Afterwards, the guy thought that he never understood girls. All of Bell's childhood friends were beauties: the seamstress Tawala, the adventurer Emerald, and even Princess Sallyberry herself. They were even called the 3 beauties of the mountain. Afterwards, the guy asked the girl why she was heading to Colonia. Sallyberry said that she needed to go to work because she was the best cosmetologist in the village. Afterwards, she added that it was very hard to be beautiful. Bell looked at her with admiration, after which he thought that the girl had not changed at all over time. Sallyberry turned to the boy and looked at him sullenly, saying that the boy must have thought of something stupid. Bell laughed and then said that of course it wasn't so. After a short pause, Bell began asking further questions, finding out how the girl was doing in her studies. It was good, of course, that she had a job, but her studies were also important. The guy continued to hold the reins, asking the girl how she was getting on with the calligraphy book. The girl, simply closing her eyes, said that it was very easy. From the look in Bell's eyes, it was immediately clear that the guy did not believe her. He only said that there was no point in lying to him, because it was not he who was whining about wanting to learn to read and write. The girl began to shake a little with excitement. Bell continued, saying that it was important to study every day, at least a little. Bell also began to say what would happen if the girl did that, but he was interrupted. Sallyberry interrupted him, saying that it was not for him to scold the girl. Then she said that she wanted to become as smart as Bell himself, and she would do that when she got home. Afterwards, the girl screamed loudly for Bell not to laugh. The guy did not understand at all what the girl was talking about, and then she explained that he looked at the girl as a child who did not want to study. Then she called him a conceited person, repeating that she would not tolerate being laughed at. Grabbing the guy by the sleeve, Belle immediately objected, saying that she was behaving dangerously because she could fall. Belle looked down and thought that if he had to deal with her for the rest of the day, his day in the other world would be much more difficult. The girl continued her hysterics, saying that Belle was not listening to her at all. Soon they arrived at the settlement of Kalaya, where they took a short break. The girl stood nearby, folding her arms, and then said that she had completely forgotten to ask the reason why the guy was going to the settlement. Afterwards, the guy looked at the girl and said that he had quite a lot of things to do. He needed to deliver firewood to the store, go to the Adventurers Guild to watch the children training, but that was not all. Afterwards, Belle would go to bring food to his grandmother from the pharmacy and then head to the fishing harbor. The girl sighed and said that it was boring. Belle stroked the horse and explained that this was his usual day. Then the girl suggested her own option and said that Belle could go shopping with her. Prane was indignant, saying how such an idea could even come to her mind. She leaned closer to him and said that he was probably bored doing the same thing every day. That was the reason she was suggesting that the young man take a break. Afterwards, Belle started to pester her, saying that the girl also had a job and that she probably needed to prepare. Sallyberry started to get angry, in response to which the young man said that she was too narcissistic. Afterwards, the door that Belle had knocked on earlier opened slightly. Grandma was very happy when she saw the young man. She almost immediately asked him to help her a little with household chores. Belle, still standing on the threshold, said that he was free and ready to find out what the matter was. Sallyberry, when she heard the guy's answer, immediately began to be indignant. The girl tensed up, taking a disgruntled stance, but Belle tried to ignore it all. The guy apologized and said that he seemed to have a job here. Sallyberry shouted that she had asked the boy for a favor first. Belle had only told her not to miss work, which made it seem like he was trying to get away from her so easily. The girl started to pout and threw a few harmless insults at the guy. The grandmother, who was standing at the threshold, said that Belle, apparently, was having a hard time being popular. Belle denied this, telling her not to even remind him of it, and then immediately began to find out what kind of help was needed. Grandma said that she wanted to buy meat. Bella had supplies in the cart, and the boy agreed, but then said that this was quite unusual for a grandmother. Then he asked her, suspecting that something more serious had happened. The woman said that a broken ship had been in the harbor for 3 days and its crew was buying a lot of food. That was the reason why the supplies on the counter were running out so quickly. The guy understood the woman, and then said that if they bought so much in just 3 days, then it was no big deal. The grandmother was surprised and asked Belle what he meant by saying that. Afterwards, the young man said that he, of course, did not know how big the ship was, but judging by its history, there were 20 or 30 crew members, so the guy was interested in how they fed such a crowd every day. Belle also added that this village was self-sufficient, so if they stayed here too long, they would run out of food. The woman put her hand to her face and guessed what the guy was getting at. Belle continued, saying that they had recently had a new lord who had raised the tax, so because of this, some were barely making ends meet, giving everything to the state treasury. The guy thought hard and said that if they couldn't solve this problem with the ship and the food, then eventually it could all turn into a nasty mess. The woman turned around and said that then it was a very big problem that was constantly growing. The woman ran towards the door and Belle shouted at her to wait. The guy looked inside and didn't understand what the rush was about. He realized that he couldn't see the woman anymore, so he decided that he needed to go to the harbor because Belle was worried about the situation and his angry grandmother. The boy arrived at a quiet and calm shore. The wheels of his cart were clattering, and Belle himself began to reason that the story was about a large ship, but there was one nuance. Belle didn't realize it would be so huge. The guy said that the ship was the size of a small island. The ship itself had a hole in the hull, which was patched up with wooden planks. Belle held his horse and continued to inspect the ship. He also noticed that there were also many people near the ship, and Belle could not understand whether they were guards or just hanging around. When he managed to leave the horse, tying it to a small post, the guy saw a lot of cargo. He also thought that this magical ship was simply amazing and most likely belonged to some rich man. All the boxes that stood on the shore were marked with one famous logo, which Belle of course knew. This was the sign of the company Baziwador. It was the most famous trading company in the country, headed by Barvand Baziwador, and the boy had also heard that their wealth was second to none. The boy scratched his head and thought that even the king was probably listening to them. The boy realized that he had run into some big shots who might not even listen to him. The boy thought that if only everything would turn out well, then a familiar voice called out to him. The young man saw an elder who told the boy to just go with him. The man shared that he was sent here by an old lady from the main store who came running and said that for the future of their village, they needed to deal with this company. Bell, who closed his eyes and threw his head back, thought that the granny was too hyperactive for her age. The boy was already feeling tired of this. They were walking along the harbor when a man approached them on his own and called out to the elder, saying that he had been waiting for him. Bell did not understand at all how everyone here knew the elder, since the ship had only been there for 3 days. The man extended his hand and asked to be allowed to introduce himself. He then said that his name was Legir and that he was a member of the Basivador Trading Company. Afterwards, the man turned his gaze to the boy and said that he had heard about him, calling Bell a local child prodigy that many had already told him about. The elder replied that Bell was the only one who could read and write at the age of 4, use magic at the age of 10, and also knew pharmacology. It was for this reason that the elder decided that Bell was the best one to negotiate with. Bell thought to himself that the people in this village had simply dumped everything on him. Then the boy smiled desperately and said that they were ready to listen to this man. Legir didn't say anything extra, saying he was ready to get straight to the point. The man smiled and bowed his head slightly, and then said they needed the boy's horse. There was immediate tension between them. Bell was annoyed by the offer, and the cheerful representative of the trading company extended his hand and said that they were even willing to pay. Looking at Legir, Bell thought that this guy thought he could get everything in this village with money. The boy thought that the man didn't even think that this was the only way to get home. Legir continued to smile, but Bell only sighed. He was well aware that because of his status, the man clearly looked down on everyone based on his status. Then Bell extended his hand forward, pointed at the man, and said that the guy agreed to sell the horse for 100 gold, and if he couldn't pay that much, then there would be no deal. The man visibly tensed up, and then said that you could buy a horse and cart in the store for 50 gold, something he thought the guy didn't know about. Bell said that it is the merchant who sets what and how much it costs. Then the guy smiled and said that he offers him a reasonable price, which the man does not agree to. The guy also said that if he sold the horse, he would need a few days to move his things home, since he lived at the top of the mountain, and if that happened, he would not be able to supply firewood. Besides, that would clearly not be the only problem with losing the horse. Bell had set a price that took into account everything that would happen to him, so his answer was honest and he would not budge. The man continued to fidget as Bell stood there smiling. Then a voice was heard ordering Legir to stop. The man even flinched when he heard it. A large sailor in furs began to climb onto the deck. The boss said that if his subordinate reacted like that during negotiations, he was not a competent enough employee. The blonde man with a mustache and a small stubble was the head of the company. He immediately apologized to the boy if during their conversation, the subordinate insulted him. The boy smiled and said he wasn't offended at all, and then clarified that the man could just call him Bell. The boy then said he was willing to continue if they still needed the horse. The man walked up and bowed his head to the boy, suddenly asking for his help in saving the team. Legir shouted at his boss, beginning to worry about his emotional state. The man said that the boy could laugh, but if someone could help them now, he didn't care, even if it was the god of death. The boy was imbued with a problem that could put an end to the whole company. The man then said that he wanted to borrow the boy's child prodigy, wisdom. The man would do everything in his power to repay him later. Bell knew that the man was going that far, even considering the boy's position. Bell thought that this was how a real boss should act. Bell agreed, saying that he could help. The boss replied that he would owe the boy, then added that he wanted to ask a lot of questions, but it was getting dark, so the man invited the boy to his place. Bell smiled and turned to the man, offering him to stay the night at their house. The boss smiled and said that he would not refuse such an offer. Entering Bell's house, the man said that they had a huge house, a bath, and a separate guest house. The man added that even the rich in the capital had fewer amenities than his family. The boss was very pleased with the visit. He also noted Giza's dish, which he had never eaten before, but he liked it so much. Bell said that even with his flattery, the guy did not think he could give more. Bell meant that a merchant of such a high level would probably eat something more delicious than simple home-cooked food. The man asked what Bell thought about it. The man explained that they spend most of their time at sea. Even if they had the best chef, he couldn't get much more out of dried meat and canned food. Bell said that was the reason why people bought up all the food in the store. The boss agreed, saying that they hadn't eaten proper food in a long time. Afterwards, Bell very firmly told the man and his team to refrain from such purchases in the future, since by doing so they were disturbing the locals. Afterwards, the guy told about the ship. The boy began to find out about the place of the hole, finding out if the hole was below the waterline. Such a professional question surprised the boss. Bell said he was amazed they were able to get to the village harbor with such a breakdown, even considering the high quality of the ship. The boss folded both his hands and looked at the boy, saying that, as it turned out, the guy was a child prodigy and was quite good at this. Bell smiled broadly, saying that he had read quite a lot. In reality, the guy was reminiscing about his past life and documentaries that had been helpful to him. The boy turned to the boss of the trading company and asked him if they really wanted to transport everything on his horse. The boss replied that it was an emergency situation where he saw no other way. Bell said that he needed one day to transport the cargo, another day to prepare the ship, and at the very end he would begin repairs, which would take another couple of days. Having gathered everything together, Bell said that if he was given 5 days, he would solve the problem that the boss and his team had. The man asked the guy in surprise that he was really going to patch up such a hole in such a short time. The man added that it was impossible and the boy probably didn't know about it. Bell put his hands together and said that he was going to put a barrier on the hole. In more detail, it looked like this. They will make barriers in a circle and then close the entire hole with them, putting them on top of each other. There will be several layers and it will be quite airtight. The boy even claimed that such material would be stronger and lighter if wood was used. The boss couldn't answer anything and then said that he didn't understand anything. He only asked how much it would cost him. The young man smiled, saying that the boss need not worry. Bell added that there was one thing that only he could do, and then added about the lord who had recently changed. The boss said that he had seen him before after all. Then Bell said that some time ago he had sharply raised taxes in their village and now the villagers were having problems. Afterwards, the guy showed a very evil grin, saying that with the connections the gentleman had, he could do something about it, and in exchange for this he would receive help. The boss asked if Bell would mind if the man took good care of him. Bell did not mind, smiling again, after which the man told him that he was a very bad person. Several days passed, as Bell had spoken of. Soon the site of the sundo was ready and sealed with magical barriers. The man looked up and said that he had not thought that Bell would really cope. Bell, standing next to him, smiled and said that he always kept his word. In any case, the boss was pleased, so he responded by saying that he should keep his word too. Afterwards, they shook hands firmly and Bell said that if he was nearby, he would definitely drop in on the man. The boss smiled and said that he would definitely wait for his new friend. The ship loaded all the boxes that had previously stood on the pier and then began to gradually set sail, moving away into the distance across the sea surface. Someone suddenly called out to Bell. The girl stood there smiling, saying that Bell had completely forgotten about her. Bell replied that it was not at all unusual to meet a lady who worked in the Adventurers Guild here. The woman said she was just shopping. After Bell asked about the guild's business, Neurophilia said they were getting more and more requests for goblins. She began to explain that there weren't many casualties yet, but the girl had heard that they had attacked a caravan near Mount Asaraki, so now everyone in the guild was on guard. Bell smiled and said that he could exterminate a few monsters for the guild, since it would be a problem if their number grew. The girl smiled back, saying that she knew about the boy's strength. The problems piled up one after another, and Bell thought that this week was really tough for him. As he went out onto the porch, the boy remembered that Touta was hunting near the mountain, so he needed to warn him. As soon as Bell remembered his younger brother, he immediately appeared in sight and was already running, holding his quiver behind his back. Bell only said that if Touta was hunting, then goblins appeared there. Touta was shaking all over and immediately hid behind his brother. Bell didn't understand what had happened, and then he turned around and saw a group of people who apologized for following the boy. They were all wearing hoods. It turned out that they were chasing the child to find Bell. The girl put her hand forward and asked if he was Vbel Fasfini. Bell firmly said that it was him and began to find out in response who were these people in hoods who scared his brother. The girl took off her hood and apologized again for her rudeness. They began to introduce themselves, gradually revealing their faces. On the right was Vanessa, who was the tallest of the girls. In the middle was Salila, and the third was Alterara. Afterwards, the girl who spoke solemnly said that she was Tokola, the leader of a C-rank group called Light in the Darkness. They asked Bell if the girls could spend the night there. Bell didn't understand the reason why they had chosen to stay at his place. The boy said that there should be a hotel at the foot of the mountain, but Tokola said that they were interested in more than just a place to sleep. The girls noticed that the guy had an interesting personality, according to many rumors, and he also had a large bathtub at home, and they really wanted to wash off the dirt from the trip. The girls added that they would, of course, pay for everything. Belle paused briefly, then smiled and said that in that case, the girls would tell about their travels instead of money. Tokola pressed her hand to her chest, saying that they had agreed. All the travelers smiled, and Tokola added that they would tell him everything until the boy was satisfied. The girls successfully settled in at Belle's. They were fed deliciously and sent to the bath, and at this time, the guy stood in the backyard and prepared his weapon for the campaign. Chappelle came running around the corner, spotted her brother, and asked him where he was going. Belle said he was going after the goblins. The boy added that he had heard there had been too many of them lately. Chappelle was very happy when she heard this. The girl said that it was very cool, and then asked her brother to take her with him because she wanted to try new magic. Belle just said that the girl still had to cook dinner, but she started pulling at his clothes, saying that it wasn't fair. Belle got angry and said that there were too many of them already, so he would take her next time. Belle went into the forest and looked around. Goblins were usually considered weak, but there was a story of 3,000 goblins destroying an entire city. So far, he hadn't seen a single one nearby. After going a little deeper, the guy started sniffing. He smelled a familiar scent, and then said that some fool decided to make a fire in the middle of the forest. Belle understood perfectly well that such actions could lead to the rapid ignition of nearby trees, and, ultimately, a huge fire would engulf the forest. Suddenly, there was an explosion, from which Belle managed to cover himself. The guy thought that this was too much, when suddenly he saw the silhouette of a child falling, who was screaming. It was Touta, who had fallen onto the soft grass. The boy was covered in soot, and then he stood up and began to shake himself off. Belle was concerned, asking if the boy was okay. Touta managed to say that he was attacked by someone he hadn't even seen. A silhouette appeared from behind the trees and said that he saw another target. Then he said that it didn't matter because they would all die soon anyway. It was a being who waved his hands and finished his words by saying that everyone would die at the hands of the flawless Rix. Rix was wearing a flawless uniform and his race was not human. Rix continued to chat, asking the plebeians how they were enjoying his charm, which apparently had left them speechless. Belle thought it was best not to let his guard down now. Belle thought it was just a goblin. Then he leaned over to Touta and started asking the boy if he had beaten him. Although the goblin looked frail, he was good at fire magic. Rick stood and listened to the brothers chatting among themselves. Touta said that he was the one who gave the goblin the opportunity to use his magic, but he just kept going, so he was pretty stupid. With that, Rix charged at the boys, yelling at them not to push their luck by talking about him like that. The goblin decided he would teach them a lesson. Belle, keeping his cool, used magic to raise an earthen barrier in front of him. Rix jumped up and laughed, saying that was all the boy could do. But as soon as Rick started to approach them, Belle put up a barrier, which he immediately hit his face against. The goblin whined that it was quite painful. The goblin fell, and the brothers remained firmly on their feet. Belle thought that the goblin really was so stupid that he just flew into the barrier at full speed. The guy also thought that it didn't matter how stupid the goblin was, because if there were many like him in the nest, then the locals were in big trouble. The guy thought he should turn to professionals. Belle returned home and found the girls from the guild in the kitchen. He announced that he wanted to assign the girls a task. Belle smiled and apologized for the inconvenience. The boy said that he wanted to ask if he could hunt goblins for him. The girls happily accepted the request, saying that they still owed the boy for his hospitality. Another girl from the squad showed up, still wearing her hood. After Belle said they could ask for whatever they needed, Alterara said they needed a whetstone, water, and a dry ration. She then added that 2 copies of the map of the area would be useful. She asked if the guy could get all of that, to which Belle responded positively. The girl turned around and started to leave the area. The leader of the squad shouted for the girl not to go far, to which Alterara dryly responded with agreement. Belle thought about the fact that he had never seen the girl before. He also thought that she must be a professional. Afterwards, he asked the group leader what he had done wrong and why the girl was avoiding him. Tokola calmed the guy down, saying that this is normal for Alterara. The girl has been through quite a lot, so she immediately sets clear boundaries for herself in communicating with others. Afterwards, Tokola smiled and said that Alterara was not a bad girl at all, because she just needed some time to open up when she felt trust. Belle watched the girl go. The guy decided to follow the girl into the forest. After she noticed him, Alterara said that the boy should have gone to bed long ago and he was chasing her. Belle, with a wide smile on his face, asked the girl not to be sarcastic, addressing her as Miss. The guy also added that he had some business here. The boy bent down to the ground and began to collect herbs, saying that according to stories, medicinal plants are best collected during the full moon. That way, they heal wounds faster, so they will come in handy. Bell held one of the stalks up in front of him and said with a warm smile that he would give them to Touta so that he could treat the burns he had suffered from his encounter with the goblin. The girl also sat down next to him, kneeling down. She calmly said that these herbs that the guy was collecting did not heal burns. Bell was a little confused after that. The girl picked some herbs herself and handed them to the boy. Then she said that it would be much better for Toot if Bell boiled the herbs she had in her right hand and then added the juice of another plant. Bell said that the girl knew a lot about herbs because the guy had never heard of such a recipe. The girl said that it was not surprising because this recipe had been passed down in her family from generation to generation. Afterwards, she smiled timidly and said that she guaranteed the effect. Also, the girl, clutching a flower in her hands, added that she would hope for the boy's condition to improve. Bell noticed that the girl rarely showed her face, and it was quite difficult to start a conversation with her, which he told her. Afterwards, Bell added that she was very interesting and asked permission to call her by her first name. Afterwards, the girl began to adjust her hood and said that she did not allow the boy to call him by his name because she hated it. Bell turned to her and said that in his opinion it was beautiful. Afterwards, the girl asked Bell if he knew what Alterara meant in Elvish. The young man remained silent, and Alterara said that it translated as, a raven in the night darkness. The girl finally took off her hood and Bell saw her elven ears and dark hair. Alterara herself said that black hair meant a bad omen for her people. The girl also added that, on top of everything else, she is a half-breed. Trying to set boundaries, Alterara said that, based on everything, communicating with her will not lead to anything good. And now, finally, Alterara opened up to him, as Bell had wanted. But for a long time he could not say anything, continuing to look at the girl. Alterara looked back at him, expecting a less than ideal reaction. But Bell, after a couple of minutes of silence, said something that surprised the girl. The young man said that Alter had wonderful hair. She began to be indignant, talking about whether the boy had even listened to her. The boy replied that he had listened. Afterwards, Bell said that in short, she was just a dark-haired girl with a touch of elven blood. Bell also said that he didn't know about her past, but that it shouldn't interfere with the girl's future. Bell said that after all, the girl had comrades with whom they traveled. The guy suggested that the girl forget about that curse and go forward proudly, no matter what. The boy continued to look at the dark-haired elf without taking his eyes off her and finally said that she was beautiful. This caused embarrassment in the girl. She thought about it and said that the guy was acting rather interestingly with his elders. Bell only replied that he was just expressing what he thought about Altera's lovely hair. The next day, Alterara came from the neighboring house, where their group was gathering for breakfast. Seeing her, the guy waved his hand and greeted the girl. The other girls in the C-rank group saw this and started to laugh, saying that Bell was clearly good. The second one said that she also thought that the younger guys were better, but Alterara shouted that it wasn't what they thought. Soon the girl met Touta in one of the passages. The girl immediately asked how the boy was feeling. Touta smiled and said that he was no longer in pain, and then thanked Miss. Alterara smiled widely in response and said that she was always ready to help. The girl also remembered Bell's words, thinking that now her heart began to shine after these words. Once again meeting Bell's gaze, the girl came a little closer and, keeping a smile on her face, said words of gratitude for Bell's sincerity. One of the adventurers came into Bell's small workshop and was surprised that the guy could forge. Bell said that he only knew a little and that he started doing it as a hobby, but he was doing it well. The girl said that the guy's quality was better than the store-bought one and she would be ready to fight for such a weapon. Bell was pleased to hear that, and then the girl asked about one-handed swords. Bell said he remembered making these, he just needed to remember where he put them. The boy opened the door and they found themselves in a large storage room of the boy's creations. Touta looked around, asking Bell if he really did it all himself. Bell replied that he did, although he had given a lot to his fellow villagers, but he had a lot left over. Looking inside, the rest of the group was surprised that the guy even had silver-plated armor and iron shields. Alterara also said that this house was like an entire armory. Bell opened one of the chests that stood in the corner and began to rummage through it. After a couple of minutes, the guy shouted what he had found and handed the blade in a dark sheath to Touta. The guy said that the blade was quite thin, but he could guarantee her killing power. Then the guy said that they could try. The girl also unsheathed the blade, agreeing to test the sword. Touta swung her blade and the sword that Bell held was instantly split into two pieces. Bell himself remained standing, as he knew what to expect from his sword. Everyone was surprised by the result. Tokola looked at the blade with loving eyes, and the girls behind him applauded the blacksmith's skill. One of them approached him and asked for the weapon for herself. Tokola called out to Salila, saying that the girl was a mage. They did not understand why she needed a weapon, but she said that she was simply curious, because maybe there would be something for her in this treasure trove. The young man walked into the back room of his warehouse, and then said that it would not be exactly a weapon. Bell raised his protective staff, asking what the girl thought about it. Bell added that the staff did not look very beautiful, but it could completely protect the girl from any magical and physical attack. Salila was amazed, saying that it all sounded good. The remaining girl, besides Alterara, said that she also wanted a weapon for herself. Bell smiled and thought that the girl was already over 20 years old, but she was acting like a child. The young man immediately took out a small tool and said that even if she asked for it, it was unlikely that the guy would find anything other than this. The girl said that it was just something of a strange shape. Alterara said that the item did look rather strange, but most likely, like other weapons of Bell, it could have interesting properties. The guy said that these weapons are called kunai, and all 6 of them were enchanted. Each of them has its own magic that can only be used once. The girl said that it was cool and she liked it. Afterwards, Bell turned around and looked at Alterara. He asked about the girl's preferences. The others were already standing aside and bragging about their new clothes. The girl said she was a spirit mage and also an archer, so all she needed was a staff and a bow. Luckily, the girl already had her favorites, so she asked not to bother. Tokola said that it was true, because the girl was very strong even on her own. Salila agreed, saying that she had the highest rank in the group. Bell couldn't even imagine that the girl was so strong. Afterwards, he said that he nevertheless had something. The guy showed a round object and said that it would be useful in any journey. The guy picked up the bracelet and said it was a portable toilet. Everyone was surprised and looked at Bell in shock. The guy explained that he was asked to make this thing by a female adventurer he knew, who also said that such an artifact is simply necessary in mixed groups. Salila put it on her hand. The guy said that this thing solves such a problem and it is also easy to use. You just need to put it on and say, "Activate camouflage." Salila did everything as Bell said, after which a large camouflage ball appeared around the girl, through which she was completely invisible. Bell said there was a pot inside too. Plus, it was completely invisible to anyone around it, so there were no disturbing smells or sounds. Afterwards, the guy held a small bag of money and told the girls that they weren't doing so well that he would give them away for free, for which he apologized. Alterara said that Bell looked like the devil. However, the boy asked what the girls were planning to do next. Alterara said that they would most likely go after the goblins, since the others were eager to try out the new weapons. While the girls were already standing near the door and begging Alterara to go to the mountain, she turned around and with a smile on her face told Bell that he could not worry because they would fulfill his request. The guy said that he now believed her, adding that the girl was a professional in her field. He also smiled broadly and said that he entrusted this to Alterara, which embarrassed her again. All the children of the Bella family, as well as the mother, stood and waved their hands, seeing the guests off. Tokola said that the boy turned out to be a real gigolo, and Salila replied that one should not underestimate the young. As soon as the guests left, Bell thought that now he could rest. The boy threw the axe over his shoulder and decided that he would put off the work for later, because now it was better to enjoy the peace. The young man first sat down on the grass, and then decided to completely sprawl out, feeling solitude and comfort. Bell almost managed to relax when he heard quick steps. The out-of-breath man shouted the boy's name, who immediately stood up when he heard him approaching. Bell asked what had happened and why he was in such a hurry. The man was sweating, and could only say that it was a terrible accident. He collapsed to the ground and said that goblins had just attacked the sawmill. Chappelle also heard screams in the backyard and rushed there. She asked her brother what had happened. Bell said that she had arrived just in time and was now in charge while her brother went to the sawmill. Bell immediately used magic to create a small platform similar to a board and rushed towards the sawmill, flying through the air. When he arrived, he immediately saw Uncle Zabar. The boy started running up to him, asking if everything was okay. The man said that they had already repelled the first attack. But there were casualties on their side, among the people. He pointed to a man lying on the ground and said that the poor guy had taken the medicine but had lost too much blood. Bell bent down and examined the wound, saying it was quite deep, indicating the monsters had weapons. Zabar said that was true, and that the goblins were in small groups, as if they were being controlled. Afterwards, Bell started to get up on his feet, saying that he was done with the man's wounds. There was already a bandage on his body, and Bell also added that the wounded man needed rest for 5 days. Zabar said he understood everything and apologized for disturbing him. Bell said it was not worth it, because when he did such things, he learned many new things. Zabar continued to praise the guy. Speaking about how no one could compare to the guy, the man suddenly opened his eyes wide. Bell asked him the reason for such a reaction, assuming that there was something on his face. Seeing someone's hands, Zabar immediately shouted loudly to Bell, warning him of the danger that was approaching from behind. Bell, however, began to turn around abruptly. There was an explosion and Bell was thrown forward several meters. Zabar was worried, asking the boy if he was okay. Bell continued to sit, groaning slightly. The goblin stood behind, also dressed in uniform. He was surprised that Bell was still alive after such a blow. Then he remembered that the boy was strong, for he had carried off his brother Rick's. The guy started shaking himself off, then told the man to run away from here. Then he added that there were adventurers in the forest, to whom he could tell that Bell was currently fighting the ogre. Zabar immediately started running, pushing his way through the tree branches. The ogre began to mock him, saying that the guy was holding up well for someone who would die in a second. The ogre was too self-confident and added that Bell should not worry, because the monster would do everything painlessly. This caused the boy to grin, when suddenly a blow flew at him. Bell jumped to the side, managing to dodge such a fast hand. The orc immediately understood his gaze, amazed at the boy's speed. The ogre continued to wave his arms, calling for the boy to stop running away from him. Calling Bell a pathetic worm, the ogre continued his series of blows, constantly missing. After that, Bell decided to demonstrate that he could do something too. The guy straightened his arm and stopped the ogre's huge fist in front of him, controlling it with one palm. The ogre's fist began to shake, trying to push the boy. The ogre exclaimed that it was impossible because the boy had managed to stop him too easily. The monster also added that the boy in front of him was a real monster. Bella was only amused by all these words addressed to him. He continued to hold his fist and grinned that this big ogre was the one calling the boy a monster. After the adventurers arrived at the place, they saw a shaking 3-meter armor. The girls came closer, starting to ask what was going on here, and the guy introduced them to the ogre. Looking at the remote, the boy said that all men in the world dreamed of having their own robot. Bell explained that he simply stuffed it into the armor and everything turned out better than he expected. Bell thought he could send the ogre to cut down the forest to compensate for the damage to the sawmill. Alterara began to approach and shouted what the guy was doing, which made Bell flinch. The boy felt the bloodlust coming from the girl. He nervously said that he was just playing with the ogre. Alterara continued to approach him with a serious face. Bell asked the girl if he had offended her in any way, to which she immediately replied, no. The girl stood and prayed to the side that the guy would try to survive this fight. Alterara was already a couple of meters away, but Bell put his hand in front of him, trying to calm the girl down, saying that they could resolve everything calmly. Alterara was shaking with anger and started saying that when they heard from Zabar that the guy was fighting the ogre, they immediately rushed here. But as soon as they arrived, they saw how the guy was just playing with him. Afterwards, still shaking, she said that Bell could play with them. She was clearly angry, and then Bell saw tears in the girl's eyes and she said that they were very worried. She started beating the boy, saying that he didn't even realize how worried they were. Bell started to close off, saying that he was in pain, but Alterara continued. Afterwards, the girl started crying even harder and said that in the end she was very glad that the guy was okay and not hurt. Bell started apologizing to her. Meanwhile, Mother gave Touta instructions, telling him not to be a hero without reason because his only task was reconnaissance. The boy stood with his head up, looking proudly into his mother's eyes. She also added that the boy should not even try to fight the monsters if he met them in the forest. Afterwards, the boy said that he would definitely listen. His mother shouted at him to also return home before sunset and then turned to Bell, saying that she was worried about the recent incidents. Rumors of monsters near the village became the hottest topic among the villagers. Even the fact that Altara's group and other adventurers were patrolling the area was not enough to calm the people down. Bell decided that he should talk to the captured ogre again, because the guy kept losing hope that the monster would talk. The mother called out to the boy at that moment. The woman said that she would not remind the boy that cruel treatment was a very bad approach and option in general. Bell turned around and said that he, as a decent person, of course knew about it. Afterwards, the guy thought that even though he had made a promise to his mother, they needed information so it could come to violence. It was not at all clear why the monsters appeared one after another. Besides, these two creatures were strange, so the usual methods might not work on them. The guy also thought that he had a feeling that told him that these monsters had knowledge. After that, Bell decided to throw away all thoughts and start figuring everything out when he arrived at the place. As he continued to walk forward, Bell's face changed to one of concern as he saw a girl in front of him lying on the ground. She was motionless and there was some kind of platform underneath her. The guy looked at the girl pitifully and thought that this must be exactly what the common people call a trap. The guy decided that he could not stay away. Seeing such a trap, Bell also had a very bad feeling. He pushed the girl slightly, finding out whether she was still alive or not. The girl began to gradually rise to her feet and Bell began to ask her about what had happened. Seeing that she was feeling fine, the guy thought that she had simply fallen asleep there. Afterwards, the girl pulled him by the edge of his cape and turned him around. The girl cried out for Bell to look at her. Her eyes were sparkling and her smile seemed crazy. Bell noticed that the girl's eyes had a magical glow. He grabbed her hand, saying that he understood everything, and then said that this was exactly how the girl tried to influence him. The girl began to tremble, not understanding what had gone wrong. He continued to look at her, and then the stranger herself decided to ask why her gaze did not work on him. Bell just smiled and said that, unfortunately for the girl, he was able to immediately put up a magical barrier, an interceptor, because he had a bad feeling from the very beginning. The girl began to struggle, but the guy, guessing the girl's race, grabbed her back and threw her up, shouting that he would not let her escape. The girl, frightened, hung in the air and began to open her wings, which she then immediately began to rush to a safe distance. The girl immediately jumped onto a tree branch and began to look at the guy in front of her. However, Bell said that it was a surprise for him, telling the girl that she was a succubus. The girl started cursing, saying that she couldn't even imagine that her magical gaze wouldn't work. Bell shouted at her that he wanted to ask her something. It was a little unnerving for him, but he continued to beg the girl to come down to him. The succubus began to scream that she actually had a name and called herself Charlie. Afterwards, Bell said that he understood and addressed the girl again, only this time by name. He decided to find out the reason why the girl was here. Charlie had already started to settle comfortably on the branch and then told Bell to return Rick's. Bell narrowed his eyes, not understanding who exactly the succubus was talking about. The boy scratched his head trying to remember, and the girl started screaming at him not to pretend he didn't know. She also added that she knew that Bell had won that time in the forest. The girl said that she would not allow Bell to mock her comrades. It was as if a revelation had dawned on the guy, and he thought that now he understood everything that was going on here. The boy also shouted that now that he had seen everything, he could firmly state that the girl had a pretty cute dress. This led the succubus into a slight confusion. Bell also said that he knew from the very beginning that it was a trap, but nevertheless, the guy simply could not take his eyes off such a beauty and her dress. The girl became embarrassed and began to show off, asking if he really thought so. The succubus also said that the master made it especially for Charlie. Charlie continued to be touched, saying that Bell was absolutely right when he said that the master had excellent taste. The girl also added that the master was kind and gave her a lot of nice clothes. Bell thought he wanted to know something else about the master. Afterwards, the succubus unhooked her hair and said that she wanted to wear more than just cute things because she was a guy after all. Bell continued to laugh nervously, saying sarcastically that the master did have good taste. Charlie said that it wasn't her fault that he was so nice. Since Bell was tired of listening to all this and realized that he would not receive normal and constructive information about where monsters come from, he pointed his hand at Charlie and locked the succubus in a cage. Bell turned and apologized to the boy, saying that he didn't have time to talk about his cute and beautiful clothes from the master. After that, Bell, like Ogre, imprisoned the succubus. Charlie tried to get out, screaming to be released. He also added that the boy was a demon and a rude person. Afterwards, the guy collapsed on the bed and was simply crushed by the load that had fallen on him. Bell knew that he wanted to know more about the boss, but all he got was gossip about clothes. Bell began to slowly fall asleep, continuing to think about the succubus, or rather about the incubus. His eyes were slowly and smoothly closing when suddenly he heard a scream in his room. Chappelle continued to scream, demanding that Bell finally wake up. Then the boy turned and asked in disappointment what had happened this time. The girl shouted that they had problems, unexpectedly for Bell saying that Touta had not yet returned from hunting. After that, Bell began to quickly get ready, waking up in the process. The older brother walked down the hallway, asking how long it had been since sunset. The girl said about an hour, and then held out an arrow. She said she had found it near the house. There was something small on the arrow, tied to its base. Bell began to unfold the small paper and realized that it was some kind of letter challenging him. The sister was about to ask about what was on the paper, but the guy just smiled and told her not to worry, because Bell was sure that Touta would soon return home. The mother was also still awake and asked her son if everything would be okay. Bell also told her not to worry either, after which a smile appeared on the woman's face. Bell brewed himself a hot drink before he started packing. He knew that even though he had told them not to worry, how could he have done otherwise, knowing that their enemies would soon be coming? There was a knock at the door. Bell shouted that the guest could come in, as they had not locked the door. Soon something unknown appeared on the threshold and it, in turn, apologized for the intrusion. The slime apologized for coming at such a late hour. Bell was stunned and didn't know what to say anymore. The slime asked if everything was okay, after which Bell began to find out what kind of creature it was. Listen sat down at the table, after which she said that she had completely forgotten about her manners. The monster called himself Bamble, after which he added that he was the butler and guard of their master. Bell smiled awkwardly and said he was ready to get down to business right away. The guy began asking about the purpose of the butler's visit to their house. Slime said that she was there to ask Bell to free Rix and Charlie. He fully understood that it was their fault, but the butler, on behalf of the master, was ready to offer a decent price. Bell raised his index finger and reminded them that the monsters had personally attacked them, and now, as it happens, they were asking to let them go. He also said that this was too selfish. Bell leaned on the table, leaning on his hand, and thought about what he could demand from their master. The guy also said that he was not very interested in money, which was what the slime expected. Afterwards, the butler himself suggested an option, throwing up his hands. The monster said that they could remain in debt and come without question to help in trouble. Bell agreed. The monster was surprised that everything was resolved so easily. Bell went to get the teapot and then said that it was now a deal. He poured a drink for the butler and offered him a helping. Afterwards, the butler again addressed Bella respectfully, saying that he understood how rude it would be on his part now, but nevertheless, the slime wanted to ask for something else. Bell was surprised and began to inquire about the butler's request, after which the butler said that he would like to ask Bell to pay them a return visit. Bell did not understand at all why he should do this. The slime started to get a little nervous as it sipped from its mug. The creature said that its master was a dungeon master, but they had been having some problems lately. Bell folded his hands and closed his eyes, saying that he understood everything. The boy promised that he would help the inhabitants of the dungeon figure out this, whatever it was. The butler thanked the young man. Afterwards, Bell threw back his mug and said that he would only fulfill the demands after he saw his brother. Slime said, a little embarrassed, that they were very sorry. Bell let Charlie and Rix go as he promised. Incubus started crying, hugging Bamble, adding information about how scared he was to be there. The butler began waving his hands, urging Charlie to calm down. Rix thought they were trying to trick Bell, but then Bamble told the ogre to apologize to the boy. Rix trembled, asking why him. The butler said that he would not accept any refusals. Then pointing at Incubus, the slime added that Charlie would also have to apologize to Bell. Charlie continued to hold the slime, and the butler at this time addressed Bell. Bamble asked the boys permission for them to take him to their dungeon. Bell asked for a little time, and then, looking into the forest, said that he knew about those who were hiding there. The guy asked the people to come out, and it was a group of adventurers who were surprised by such agility of the guy. The guy pointed to the place where the bracelet was usually worn and smiled widely. Bell said that he made it, so of course he could detect them. The guy put his hand on his belt and resolutely asked the girls why they were chasing him and a group of monsters. Alterara immediately said that they simply did not want to let the guy go to such a dangerous place alone. Afterwards, the dark-haired elf glanced around the boy and turned her attention to Bamble, asking him menacingly if they could join in. Slime said that it wouldn't be a problem. Bamble, still in Charlie's arms, waved a little and said that they would always be glad to see those who were Bell's friends. Bell, hearing this, smiled broadly and said that since everyone was gathered here, they were ready to move towards the dungeon. The girls agreed with him. And now they were already going down the dark dungeon where Charlie was leading them ahead. The guy told Alterara not to worry because they just came to talk. The girl said that it was still the dungeon master. Afterwards, Bell said that since she brought up such a topic, she should explain who the dungeon master was. Alterara said that this was the head of all the monsters that lived underground. She also added that some had strong magic. Bamble began to happily wave his hands and tell the guests that they had finally arrived. The boy stared at what he saw with wide eyes. He couldn't believe that he would meet something like this in this world. It really amazed the boy. The girls were also surprised to see the shape of the dungeon that the butler pointed to. They began to discuss the structure, saying that it could be a tower or ruins. In any case, it was the first time they had seen it. Alterara asked Bell if he knew anything about such things. The guy smiled and said that he didn't even know how to explain it to the girl. Bell smiled widely, slightly nervously, and said that he had a sense of déjà vu. The dungeon was an ordinary apartment building that somehow ended up in this world. Alterara called the boy again, starting to worry. Bell exhaled and apologized, saying that he was just thinking for a bit. After he collected his thoughts, they went inside. BVM Bell waved his hand at the guy and said that the entrance was this way. Meanwhile, Incubus and Ogre were already opening the door of the building, which seemed to Bell to be an ordinary dorm from his old world. When they entered, the boy even noticed a small sign that said this was Itoki Dormitory. The girl who was at the entrance replied that the master was in his room. The girl looked out, greeting the guests. She said that her name was Kyoko, and she was the manager and part-time guard of this dorm. Bell was surprised that the girl was guarding the dungeon. The girl said that she was a special kind of creature that was bred by the master, so she was confident in her strength. She smiled and clenched her fist in front of her. As they walked further, Alterara said that they needed to be extremely careful, as messing with their master, who was in charge of the dungeon, was really bad. There was even a working elevator in this building. The guy thought that even if all her assistants had such a kink, the master's skills should really amaze him. As they walked forward, Bell worried about Tout, who must be around here somewhere. The boy noticed the mess in the room, but Bamble only said that the master did not like her things to be touched. Touta heard his brother and immediately ran to him. Bell hugged the boy, saying that he was glad to see him alive and well. Touta asked his brother to help, hiding from someone. A girl was running after the boy and started shouting at him, asking where he had gone. The girl called him Seta in a very strange way, like little boys in Japanese fantasies. Alterara rushed forward, drawing her blade. Bamble immediately jumped up and stood up to protect his master, saving the girl in glasses. Alterara swung her blade, but the butler was able to parry the blow, calling for Alterara to calm down and put down her weapon. The girl said that their master started first. The girl covered her mouth, thinking out loud about what she should do now, because she was running after her Seta. Then the girl trembled slightly, saying that now a written beauty had appeared in the room. The guy looked at this girl who seemed crazy to him and said that she was not part of his plans at all. The guy turned around and said that it was time for him to go. Alterara continued to stand in place, holding the blade in her hand, and then told Bell that if something happened, he could simply whistle to her and she would quickly deal with their master. The guy left everyone at the door, and then said that this was real nostalgia. Then the guy said that he did not want to believe, but why did he meet another reincarnated person in this way? The girl looked at the boy with admiration, and then shouted, asking if he was also reincarnated. Bell lowered his head and told her not to shout like that because she might wake Tout. The guy also said that it seemed like they lived in the same time in the past because many things in her room reminded the guy of that life and made him feel nostalgic. Afterwards, Bell began to shame the girl, saying that she had the same circumstances as him but had already become completely spoiled and gone crazy. The girl exclaimed that he had put forward his first opinion too early. Afterwards, the girl sat down at the table and said that she forgot to introduce herself. The master identified herself as Shigemochi Erina. She understood that a lot had happened, but she hoped that she and Bell would get along. The girl asked Bell for protection, saying that all sorts of heroes and other monsters were chasing her. Bell became curious about why others were hunting her. The girl said that the main problem is that she simply exists. Then she admitted that there are some problems with her body, the cause of which were her wishes during reincarnation. Bell asked again what the girl wished for, and she began to list. The first thing she asked God for was to be reincarnated with her own body. In other words, the girl was undead, or more precisely, a lich. Erina hit the table and said that although she looked like a human, she was actually a monster. Bell said that in that case there are advantages, such as a large reserve of mana and the features of the body. Erina agreed with this, then said that the main problem is her diet. Liches feed on the life force of others using energy drain, but in the girl's case there were pitfalls, because she could only feed in her dungeon. The guy said that she was quite comfortable here, after which Erina said that this was her second wish, because such a place seemed simply ideal to her. Afterwards, the girl said that she could also create other servants for herself, so she was having a lot of fun here. The guy started swearing, saying that all this was worthless if she couldn't protect herself. The girl said she was very ashamed, but Bell didn't intend to stay there long. He took his brother and said he couldn't help her, and then shouted goodbye. Bamble asked Belle to listen to him and then said that all this was confusing, but they were constantly just surviving, moving from place to place. Here they found their home and wanted to protect it at any cost. Bamble tried to reach Belle, saying that they had nowhere to go and needed the boy's strength. The young man thought for a while and then agreed to help the inhabitants of the dungeon. Suddenly, a familiar goblin ran into the room, shouting that they had problems. Belle immediately recognized him, and the goblin, clutching his torn-off horn, asked what Belle was doing there. Bamble immediately told him that Rix was in front of the master. The goblin immediately apologized and then said that they had found a group of orcs near the dungeon and they were heading straight here. The girl was very scared by this news, and then said that they were constantly stalking the girl. Alterara pulled the guy sharply, saying that they urgently need to escape from here because the orcs are very dangerous. Arena shouted for the guy to help her cope with this threat. Belle asked about the number of orcs and Rix answered that there were about 81 of them. Belle understood that each of them was equal to a high-ranking soldier and there were also several mages with them. The guy thought that the only way to do this was to go straight ahead, but then he said that he wouldn't fight but would still help. With the help of magic, the guy summoned some weapons from his warehouse. The boy held out the sword and told Arena's people to use it to catch the orcs alive so that they could provide their master with food for a long time. After he handed out guns to everyone, he said that now they could handle it themselves. Charlie said that if the guy was done here, he could go back to his home. After a while, they were already walking down the street towards home. Then Belle said that their master was really unusual. Alterara said that she was surprised because he was able to talk to Lich. Finally, Touta woke up after a long sleep in the dungeon. The boy began to rub his eyes and soon his stomach began to rumble. He only said that he was very hungry. Belle smiled, saying that he had to be patient for a while since they were almost home. Surely Chappelle and his mother had prepared something for him regardless of the time. The Bella family was going about their usual routine. Tokola and the other girls went outside and said that they wanted to head into the forest now to patrol it. Belle wished the girls to have fun. Chappelle waved her hand. Mother looked at the sun and squinted slightly, saying that today was a very good day for washing. Chappelle smiled back and said that the clothes would dry very quickly if the sun continued to shine like this. Suddenly, the girl saw something suspicious on the road. Belle did not understand what Chappelle was trying to tell him. She said that she saw many carriages. She wondered who could have arrived. The carriage drove up to the house and stopped. The door opened, and a man whom Belle already knew came out. Chappelle also smiled widely. A tall man with light eyes slowly climbed out of the carriage. It was Uncle Aval, a merchant. The man began waving at them. Belle returned the favor, asking how the man was doing. As he got closer, Belle noticed that the guy had brought a large group. Belle said that it was a gift to them when he came alone. Aval said that anything can happen. Then the merchant asked the others to introduce themselves. The guy next to Aval began to hesitantly try to construct his introductory speech. Belle did not understand what the guy was afraid of. Afterwards, the young man took off his headdress and shouted furiously that he was the merchant's apprentice. The boy bowed his head slightly and said that it was a great honor for him to meet Belle. Belle waved his hand, urging the boy to relax, and also said that the young man did not have to be so polite. Aval told Belle to be calm because his student was just nervous since it was his first day on the job. After the boy put his headdress back on, Aval said that the boy would one day be his successor in this position. Aval also added that it was for this reason that Belle could treat him accordingly. Belle was surprised. The boy asked the merchant again whether the boy would really replace him. Aval said that it was. He shared that he was going to leave the trade and open his own shop in the settlement. Belle didn't understand what the merchant was saying. After all, he wasn't old enough to make such plans now. Belle thought that something was wrong with him, but Aval already wanted to explain everything. Another man appeared from the carriage. It was a girl with short hair. She asked what happened. The girl said her name was Serenilla. She also added that she had heard a lot about Belle from her husband. Belle was surprised that Aval got married. The merchant began to scratch the back of his head, paused, and then hugged his wife and firmly said that he, or rather they, were now married. Belle started to get hysterical, saying that everything had happened too suddenly for him. Aval said that it had already happened and he didn't see any problems. The guy, on the contrary, began to clap his hands and said that Aval should have told him about such good news earlier so that the guy could congratulate them properly. Aval felt ashamed. Soon Chappelle also shouted congratulations. Seeing the girl, the merchant was shocked. Serenilla asked what happened. Belle said that Aval had brought his wife home. Aval asked the guy to stop. Afterwards, everyone headed towards the house to settle down. Mother smiled and said that the travelers were probably tired from the road. The woman calmly said that they could make themselves at home. Aval's assistant said that he had an important deal coming up soon, so he needed to step away. Mother was surprised that the boy had to run away. Aval said that it was so that others would not feel left out. The boy approached Belle. The boy asked to walk with him to the center of the settlement to show him everything. Belle agreed. The assistant leaned over and said there was something he wanted to share with Belle and get his opinion. The cart set off, and after a couple of minutes on the road, the guys started talking. Aval's assistant said he wanted to prepare a surprise for his boss and his fiancée. Belle asked him again, and the boy immediately explained that since then they had been constantly on the move, and Aval and Serenilla had not really been able to celebrate their wedding ceremony. That's why the boy said he really wanted to do something for the two of them. After everything Aval and his wife had done for the boy, he felt he owed the couple something. Belle began to shake slightly, feeling the boy's feelings. He thought that the boy was very kind. Afterwards, Belle put his hand on his shoulder and told him to trust Belle and they would throw the best party. Belle suggested that the boys could combine the wedding party with a celebration in honor of their arrival, bringing together the entire village. Now they had to think about outfits. The assistant asked if they could be prepared today. Belle said it was a great coincidence. Ahead of them on the road walked a girl with a basket on her shoulders. It was Touta, a local craftswoman whom Belle immediately called out to. The girl turned around and asked what happened. Belle began to explain to her, saying that out of the blue they wanted to ask her to prepare the wedding dress today. Belle apologized for being so unexpected, but it was for Avala's wife. The girl asked if the merchant was really going to get married. The girl said she had a great outfit for the occasion. She added that she was sure the outfit would be great. Belle was counting on her. Aval's apprentice froze, asking Belle who the girl was. The boy added that he hadn't even had a chance to say hello. Belle explained that she was his childhood friend, the seamstress with golden hands, Touta. The young man also said that he really wanted to help Belle. The guy added that he would do anything, and then asked about his comrade's future affairs. The cart began to slow down, and Belle got off it. The guy said that the assistant was going on by himself, and all he had to do was climb the hill, and then he would get to the colony. Belle waved at the boy, saying that they would see each other soon, and then headed towards the trees. The boy turned to Salibaria, asking how long she would hide. The girl glared at Belle and said sarcastically that he was always too busy. Belle asked her what had bitten the girl that she had started behaving like that. Suddenly, Belle noticed that the girl had cut her hair. He asked her about her new hairstyle, which she was clearly happy about. The girl smiled and asked how this look suited her. Belle looked at Saliberry and said that she looked cute. The guy also added that he would never have thought that the girl was so skillful. While Saliberry was accepting compliments, Belle came up with a great idea. The girl continued to smile and tell the young man not to stop. Belle told the girl that she could do something for him. Belle asked to make Serenilla's hair so beautiful, and Saliberry clenched her teeth. Saliberry began to ask with displeasure who this girl was that Belle was talking about. The young man immediately answered that she was Avala's wife and they wanted to throw a party in honor of the wedding and arrival. Saliberry turned away. Belle didn't see that she was jealous. The girl said that they had to tell everyone as soon as possible. She grabbed Belle's hand and asked where it would all take place. Belle didn't understand why she was in such a hurry. Saliberry shouted that they didn't have time to take things slow. The guy didn't even realize how much needed to be done for the wedding. Saliberry thought it would be rude to do things half-heartedly for Aval and his wife. They soon arrived home, where Serenilla and Chappelle greeted them, informing them that dinner was almost ready. Serenilla, still holding the knife in her hand, asked where Bach was. Belle said that the guy was probably late with his business, and then asked the girl to put the knife down. After the request, Serenilla realized how it all looked. She felt awkward and added that she did not mean to act so stupidly. She was scared, because sharp things are not something to greet guests with. Chappelle began to calm her down. Aval entered the room. Belle immediately turned to him, saying that his wife was a little unusual. Aval said that the girl was from the nobility, so she was not used to working with many things. Aval also asked Belle to teach the girl if possible. The merchant also thought that once Belle noticed this, could he really tell whose daughter she was? Belle turned around and started to smile slyly, twirling his finger around and saying that he would never have thought that about Aval. The guy really tried to get that gold. Looking at the girl, the merchant explained that Serenilla had left her home to become a doctor. The boy expressed gratitude to her parents for disinheriting her and wishing her never to return. Afterwards, Aval, after a short pause, said that he simply fell in love with the character of this girl, considering what she had to go through. Belle, however, looked at his friend in surprise, standing behind him. Bell tried to stop the guy, telling him not to fall in love with her again and again. Aval told him not to lecture his elders and let him quietly build a cozy nest. Bell smiled and said that in that case, the guy would give him the opportunity to build a house for them. Bell said that he would arrange everything and that it would be his wedding gift, with which Touta would help. Bell asked where Aval would like to live, and the man immediately asked for everything to be close to Bell. Aval also wanted to ask the Lord for permission to build a house. Bell also said that if Serenilla was a doctor, they could also make a clinic while the boy was here. Hearing this, Aval's wife began to scream joyfully, not believing that this was possible. The girl put her hands together and said that she had been dreaming of her own clinic for a long time. Bell looked at the couple with a smile and then said that it would take him some time. Bell smiled again. The guy said that he had one more gift for their wedding. It was for this reason that he called the newlyweds to prepare. Aval and Serenilla stood and did not understand what else Bell could do for them. At this time, Bell and Touta had already begun to construct a new home for Aval. Bell raised his head and looked towards the forest, seeing a group of people approaching them from there. These were the adventurers who began waving. Bell told the girls that he was glad to have them back. The girls started saying that it was really nice to have someone waiting for them. For the first time in a long time, they felt at home. Suddenly, they saw a new building that appeared very close to Bell's house. The girls looked at him in surprise and said that this house was not there in the morning. Aval went outside and, seeing the girl, realized that they were Bella's guests. Tokola put her hand on her chest and said that she was pleased to meet him, and then she introduced her group, Light in the Impenetrable Darkness. Aval was surprised that it was really them. The guy said that he would never have thought that he would meet slaughter maidens here. Tokola asked not to call them that. Bell came closer and started asking the guy what he was talking about. Aval said that Bell really was from the backwoods because this squad was real celebrities. Aval said that according to rumors, these girls destroyed the main forces of goblins in the neighboring country, and there were only 4 of them. Many legends were made about them, giving honor to the girls. Bell thought about it and said that he must be lucky to have people like that protecting him. Alterara started waving her arms, a little embarrassed, and asked the guy to stop, saying that they weren't that great. Chappelle ran out into the yard and called her brother. She said that Sallyberry had just arrived. Bell asked how the preparations were going, to which Chappelle replied that they only had to bring out the food. Bell also turned to the girls and said that they could help him today. The squad perked up and the girls began to find out the details of the actions that were required of them. Bell smiled broadly and said that any further questions should be directed to Chappelle. Aval asked suspiciously that Bell and the others were hiding something from him. Afterwards, he turned around and said that it seemed like the time had come. He was immediately interrupted by Bach, who ran up and apologized for being late. Bell said that the young man arrived just in time. The people who were behind Bach cried out solemnly, congratulating him. Avala with the wedding. The headman raised the bottle and said that they brought excellent wine. All the villagers continued to smile, and at that moment, Bell said that they were now going to celebrate the guy's wedding, so they invited the whole village to congratulate them. Aval was a little upset, then looked down. The man said he hadn't heard anything about it. Bell immediately objected, reminding him that it was a surprise. Afterwards, Bell said with a smile on his face that Aval couldn't even imagine who the author of this idea was. The guy said that it was Bach, whom the man could thank. Bach approached with a small bouquet of wild flowers and handed them to Aval. The boy congratulated his elder on his wedding and wished that his marriage to Serenilla would be a happy one. Aval was touched by such a gift. The man began to cry with happiness. Bell said that it was too early to do this, because the main character had just arrived. Aval turned around and saw his bride. Bell laughingly shouted at him to greet his lady. This immediately left him speechless. Serenilla really looked gorgeous in the dress that Tula made for her. People were throwing petals in the air, and the bride was slowly moving towards her groom. The girl smiled and then ran into Avala's arms. The merchant was amazed when she managed to dress up, to which the girl solemnly shouted, amazed at the traditional and cute clothes of the settlement. Bell turned around and said he expected nothing less from his 2 childhood friends. Tula said they always did their best, and Sallyberry added that she worked hard too. Aval accepted his wife and turned to the master of the house. He said that he did not even know how he could thank Bell and everyone else for this celebration. The man said he didn't know how he could thank the entire village, and then he began to cry again. Bell again said it was too early to cry because the boys were going to have a party in honor of their arrival. Afterwards, everyone started throwing petals into the air, and Bell called on the entire village to dance until they dropped and loudly celebrate this wonderful event. After the party, the new family was moving into the newly built house. Serenilla came inside, asking where to put the boxes. Aval said that they needed to be put on the first floor. Belle helped and asked where to put the books. 4 days after the wedding, the guys finally managed to finish building the Aval house. It was wonderful and the bride and groom really liked it. The ground floor of the main building was given over to the Aval Trading Company, while Serenilla Hospital was being built nearby. Soon, a noise behind them caught their attention. The girl dropped her things. She apologized to Aval, said that she had ruined everything again. Aval told her not to take such trifles to heart. Belle smiled and said that he already understood that the boys loved each other. The boy advised them to find another time for this, since all their goods were still scattered around the house. Belle saw that there were indeed a lot of books in this house, and he would never have guessed that Aval read so much. Suddenly, he noticed something else unusual. The boy saw that one of the books was covered with a magical barrier, which surprised him greatly. Aval said that he asked Serenilla to do it for him. Belle asked who Aval wanted to sell such a miracle to. The guy picked up a book with a picture and said that it was intended for mermaids. After that, he added that he once wanted to start trading with them. After that, Aval added, he remembered one detail. The guy asked Bella to lend him the little house that the boy had been standing in the harbor not long ago. Aval also said that he would definitely pay the rent from the proceeds. The merchant really thought it was a good deal and now he was just waiting for Belle's answer. Afterwards, Belle said that, as a rule, people cannot read underwater, so there will definitely be a demand for this. So the guy thought that all this promised him a good fate. But after that, Belle raised his finger and said that at the moment one of the problems was still not solved. Aval looked at the guy in surprise and then began to find out what he was talking about. Belle smiled awkwardly and said that at the moment the mermaid world was still at war, so it would be problematic to trade with them. Aval was surprised by this turn of events. Belle tried to tell everything briefly. Different countries are currently fighting underwater. He then gave an example as if their kingdoms on Earth were now in tense relations. The area around the harbor where Belle's house stood was considered the edge of the sea, so Aval didn't think the war would reach there. Belle said that at the moment they were only buying weapons and medicine. Afterwards, Belle continued, saying that there would be no one who would buy a book at such a time. Aval turned pale and Belle immediately apologized, adding that few people would buy them at all. Aval said sadly that it was a terrible time to start a business, and he had no idea it was that bad. Belle said they would walk to the harbor tomorrow and check it out. The next day came. The boys arrived at the harbor. Belle pointed at the house and said that this was exactly what Aval had spoken of. He could use it. Belle added that part of the house was underwater and he could trade with the mermaids there. Aval understood everything. Afterwards, Aval asked whether he would have to dive into the water for a long time, since Belle probably understood that he would not be able to hold his breath for several hours. On the pier, emerging from the water, Aval did not know them as Belle, but the boy thought they looked like a race of squids. Belle also thought that, seriously, these girls looked suspicious. At that moment, the two mermaids took out their weapons and pointed them towards the two guys. Aval said that the mermaids were probably going to attack, which Belle agreed with. It seemed that the boys were in trouble, and two girls rushed towards them. Then Belle shouted that they had to run and pulled the boy by the hand. The boy had a plan and said that they were going to jump down now. Aval shouted that he couldn't swim. Unfortunately, it was already too late and they jumped into the water. Once they were underwater, Aval said that he was able to breathe here. Belle smiled and said that he had covered the boy's entire body with his magical barrier. Aval noticed that the two girls were still chasing them. The boy shouted that these squids were very persistent. Belle began waving his hand, calling for them to swim in his direction. Aval was surprised that the boy had his own shelter underwater. Belle said that it was General Haruri's residence, which was not far from here, so the boy was sure that there were soldiers there. Suddenly, Bella was grabbed by one of the mermaids, which scared him greatly. It was his friend, a mermaid named The girl immediately asked the guy if he had accidentally hurt himself. Aval was surprised that Belle knew this mermaid. Belle smiled and said that this girl was named and she was the personal secretary of the general of the underwater country. The girl began to ask, in response, who was with Belle. The guy said that they had little time to introduce themselves and they asked to hide them in the residence. Belle said something that scared the girl. He told her that some squids were chasing them. Said that she didn't see anyone there except for the two guys. Afterwards, the guy said that they should move while they could. Shouted that they couldn't do this, as it was very dangerous further on. Pulled Belle and said that they needed to return to Earth. Belle did not understand what was happening to the girl and then Said that not long ago they were invaded by an empire and now they are looking for Bell. Aval called for everyone to stop because he didn't understand anything anymore. The guy said that Bell had told him about some empire before, to which Bell replied that it was most likely them. Bella was curious as to why they were looking for him. The girl said that even though they were a small underwater country, they could defeat their enemies in a fair fight because Bell had given them equipment. Afterwards, the girl said, upset, that the Imperials had found out who supplied the weapons to their kingdom. So now they were looking for the source of the equipment, or, in other words, him. Bell asked about the general who was supposed to be there. Otherwise, the guy was not going to allow the invasion. The girl agreed with him, saying that trouble was coming. Tears began to appear on Or's face, and the girl said that she was entrusted by the general to protect this place, but she could not cope. This upset the girl very much. Bell said that it wasn't that bad, trying to calm her down. The boy said they just needed to get these Imperials out of here. Aval was shocked to learn that Bell was actually going to fight them. Began to beg Bell to put these thoughts away. The girl said that they had more than 100 soldiers, and it didn't even matter how strong the boy was. Bell just smiled and said that everything would be fine. The guy added that he was not going to go out and fight them fairly, because it was him, and such things were not in his manners. Aval said that the Sea Empire should not be underestimated. Bell repeated that he would be fine. Then the guy said that it would be better for them to hide somewhere. Swam up to Aval and anxiously asked what Bell was going to do. She was a little confused and didn't know how to address the man. He said that he was very pleased to meet her and his name was Aval. Aval also smiled and said that he had known Bell for quite a long time. It seemed to him that this guy had some kind of plan in his head, which the merchant there seemed to have guessed. Afterwards, he explained to the girl that she really shouldn't worry. The guy said that if this is the plan he thought of, Bella will definitely succeed. At this time, the residence was being roamed by Imperial water creatures who were going to destroy all the weapon boxes and storage facilities they could find. They also wanted to take all the food and medicine. Soon their commander, who was giving orders to the others, noticed a guy sitting on top and watching them. Bell thought that the Imperials were acting like bandits. He pointed his finger up and shouted that he saw a man. Everyone did not believe that it was possible. They immediately thought that this was the author of that stunning weapon. Bell started to come down to them, saying that he had a message. The guy told them to all get out of here or they would get some pain first. The captain shouted that the boy didn't dare look down on the Empire. Then they all rushed to the attack, shouting that they would kill this land monkey now. Bell just thought that these Imperial fish were very cruel. The guy created a large net as a barrier and directed it towards the attackers. They immediately began to retreat. Bell pulled the net up, smiling and shouting that he had a great catch today. The guy locked her up and tied her to a rock, thinking about what to do with these guys. Quietly whispering that he would send the entire army to Japanese roles, the guy immediately caused a cry that he was a real barbarian and devil. Aval and watched what was happening together. The girl also felt uneasy and said that she did not expect such words from Bell. Aval explained that she should not take all this seriously because the guy was having fun like a child. Aval came down and told the boy that he should stop joking like that. Bell apologized, saying that the sun had already set so they needed to go up. The merchant suddenly dropped a book from his bag, which he had taken with him as a sample. Saw this and reached for it, saying that the guy dropped something. Upon closer inspection, realized that it was a book, which surprised her greatly. She said that it was simply amazing and that she would never have thought that she would find something like this underwater. Aval said he was glad she liked it. He said he was going to sell them to the mermaids. Hugged the book and didn't understand what the merchant was talking about. Bell came closer and said that Aval was indeed a merchant. Said that their city was in decline. Bell replied that he could help them by gathering materials from the land and there would be no charge for it. The girl said that it would help. Aval said that he would take part and that they would see each other. Aval also smiled and said that he could not abandon those in trouble. These words put into a very small stupor and she became slightly embarrassed. Bell also smiled and said that Aval was a fine man, but should hold on to his seahorses while he could, for the merchant was already married. The girl was embarrassed by this statement. She said that she hadn't even thought of it that way. The girl called Bell a fool, and the guy continued to laugh. After some time, all the residents of Bell's house were sitting in the kitchen. Alterara was indignant that the guy was going to go to the strange dungeon with the lich girl again. Bell blew on his hot drink in his mug and said that he had promised to help them, so it was only logical to do so until they could defend themselves. Then Touta appeared in the room, calling out to his brother. Touta said that he wanted to go there too. Bell chuckled, saying that he meant that perverted place and began to find out if everything was okay with the guy, because last time he was eager to get out of there and was very tired. Touta grabbed his shirt and squeezed it, admitting that he was still afraid. But the boy had to go there again to overcome this stupid fear and become stronger. Bell started laughing, saying that his brother had made a very good point. He also added that he couldn't expect anything less from his younger brother. Alterara watched this conversation with a smile. Alterara also said that she would be worried if the boys went there alone, so she would go with them. Bell replied that he was counting on a girl. When Bell returned to the dungeon, they were immediately met by Arena. He also saw Bamble, who began to calm the master down. Bell thought that nothing had changed since their last visit. The girl looked at Bella happily with her former furious gaze and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Bell asked Arena to wipe her drool before greeting him, which she noted was rude. Afterwards, the girl began to ask frantically what kind of brilliant plan Bell had come up with. Bamble was also very happy about this, but the boy urged everyone to be patient. Bell brought some treats, which he immediately placed on the table. Afterwards, the boy began waving his hand, giving instructions. The boy said that they needed to build a city underground and found a country where Itoki would be the capital. Bell also pointed at the girl and said that she would become the ruler of this country. Arena was surprised. The boy asked again. Alterara was also amazed by the boy's plan. Bell began to explain, saying that they could grow vegetables and raise livestock on such a large area. This would bring them money with which they could provide protection. After Bell concluded that in this case, they can stop fearing enemies. Bamble did not understand how they could sell the harvest to people, to which Bell told them to dig a tunnel to the port and trade with the mermaids. Arena rushed forward, joyfully rejoicing that there were mermaids in this world. Bell had said that they should start with the tunnel. The girl had paraphrased that, saying that they would be standing in something like the Geofront from Evangelion. Lich said she really liked the idea and it excited her. She said she would give it her all to dig this tunnel. Bell said she would have a more important task. Bell chuckled and turned to Arena. The guy said that she should start intensive training so that the girl could work outside in the future. Arena was surprised by this statement. Bell only said that it was really time to work with his hands, so now is the time to give it his all and stop relying on others. The girl reminded him that she was undead. She said that she would catch fire if she came into contact with the sun's rays. Bell said that in that case, the girl would have to work after sunset. He thought Arena was stupid. Bamble began to throw up his hands, calling on the master to try. The girl agreed and said that she would do everything in her power. Bell smiled and said that he would share the rest of his ideas next time. As they started to leave the dorm, Touta started to tug at his brother's clothes. The boy suggested racing home because he had gotten faster. Bell had told the boy to show what he had learned. After the command to start, they rushed home. In the end, Touta lost, and Bell said that it would take him another 1,000,000 years to win, although he was really close. Bell saw that Alterara was also running and trying to catch her breath. He asked the girl if she was okay, to which Alterara replied that they should not leave her alone next time. Suddenly, a goat came up to them, and its muzzle came right up to the elf. Alterara got very scared, jumped back, and screamed. She asked what the goat was doing there. Bell folded his arms and said he had almost forgotten about Shearing Day, which was today. Soon Touta approached them and greeted the boys. The girl said that there were too many women at his house who could help with the haircut, since it was women's work in their village. Alterara looked at the seamstress in surprise. She immediately handed her a pair of special scissors and suggested she try them. The girl started waving them off, saying that she didn't know how to use them at all. Afterwards, Touta pointed to the other adventurers and said that her friends had quickly gotten used to it and were doing well. The girls waved their hands, greeting Alterara. Alterara also said that she hadn't even noticed the girls because they fit so naturally into the job. Coming closer, Alterara added that Touta had very dexterous hands. Bell turned around and said that he needed to leave the girl now. Alterara immediately asked where he was going, to which the young man proudly replied that men had other work. The girls looked at him in surprise. Bell stepped aside and began to think about everything. He thought that it was really hard for a guy to stay in a place for girl talk. He also realized that he couldn't just be lazy for a long time. Thinking back on everything he had done in the last couple of weeks, the guy felt like he had been working too hard lately. After reincarnation, he thought he would have the life of an ordinary villager. But all this was still much better than sitting in the gray and stuffy city from his past life. Bell really believed that life in this world was much better than before. Suddenly, the guy noticed an amazing and unusual creature that was modestly hiding nearby, trying not to attract attention. It turned out to be a strange half-beast, whose body was a bizarre combination of animal and human features, and the stomach of this creature growled loudly and distinctly, betraying its intense hunger. Bell, driven by compassion and a desire to help the hungry creature, decided that he could try to feed the animal something from his supplies. Carefully handing the cookie to the animal, the guy watched with interest as it sniffed the offered treat warily, eventually accepted it with gratitude, and ate it with pleasure. Seeing that the little animal had accepted the cookie, the boy said that he could prepare something more substantial and filling, cooking something quickly. He asked thoughtfully if the little animal ate meat. Bell extended his hand and, using his magical abilities, suddenly created a small pot out of thin air. With a smile, the boy said that now everything needed to cook a delicious meal was ready. The little animal, having mastered a full pot of hot and aromatic food with meat, felt full and satisfied. Lying down on his back right on the ground, he let out a satisfied snort. Bell thought that he couldn't leave the child here to sleep and he had to decide what to do with him. As soon as the guy began to stretch out his hand to the half-beast, a silhouette appeared behind him who immediately asked him not to touch the creature. The voice continued, asking what he was going to do with his daughter. Bell said he didn't have to worry. The girl fell asleep after Bell fed her. The boy wondered who he was. The man took the child and said that he was the chief of the Sirata tribe and his name was Herbal. He said that her name was Eliza. Bell said the man was apparently so worried about the child that he left her alone. Bell also added that he found the girl very weak and hungry. It all looked like there was a reason for it. Bell told the man to find a shop called Aval, a trading company. It's not far from the village. The guy told the man to clarify that he came from Bell. He was sure that he would listen to the story of this beast. Herbal asked why the boy was helping them, and doing it selflessly. Bell extended his hand and said that in hard times they should all help each other. Herbal sincerely thanked the guy. He walked back into the forest, holding his child in his arms. Suddenly Touta came running, calling out to his brother. Bell asked if they had finished the haircut. Looking up, Touta said that it would soon be dark, so he suggested that they return home. Bell smiled and agreed, saying that they would do it together and perhaps even race each other. The boy confidently said that this time he would not lose. After some time, Chappelle and Bell went somewhere together. On the way they met Aval and his wife, who were also walking around the neighborhood. The girl said that Chappelle was very happy today. The girl said that it was true, and then said that they were going to get plera fruits. Serenella didn't know anything about it, and Belle explained that it was a sour fruit, but it was great for making jam. Afterwards, the girl leaned over and said that she would like to make jam too. She asked where this fruit grows, and the happy Chappelle shouted that it only grows on a desert island. The girl asked how they were getting to the island. She thought it was flying magic, but Bell said he couldn't fly and carry Chappelle, so there was another way. It was a huge dragon with small front paws, whose name was Rukuku. He landed nearby, and Avala's wife began to hiccup in fear. She couldn't believe it was a dragon. Bell said that usually the guy asks him to take care of things, but when they go to the island, they always fly on him. Chappelle said that they should hurry and continued to run cheerfully towards the dragon. Bell waved at the boys and said that they would see them later. Soon they almost reached the desired place on their dragon. They arrived on an island that was surrounded by water on all sides, and in its center was a huge mountain, several hundred meters high. As soon as they landed on the ground, Chappelle began to rejoice that they had finally arrived. Bell said that the girl should not let down her guard until they knew all the dangers here. Chappelle immediately ran ahead towards the forest, and Bell, walking behind, sighed heavily. He was glad that she was growing up to be such an energetic girl, but what could he do about her childish behavior? They climbed a little higher and Chappelle stopped abruptly. She pointed her finger at the shore, asking what that thing was standing there. Bell looked away, realizing it was a submarine. The guy started looking around further, and soon they found a small campsite. Bell noticed a sofa and then picked up a can and realized that there were things in there that shouldn't exist in this world. Suddenly, someone shouted for Bell and the girl to stay where they were. When Bell turned around, he saw a naked man holding a gun. The stranger wanted to know who had come to his island. The boy covered his sister's eyes and said that he wanted to know the same thing as the man. He also told the stranger to put something on before they started talking. Soon they were sitting around the fire and the man was apologizing for the rudeness he had shown earlier. The man said his name was Bandu Takaru. He was 16 years old and he was Japanese from Earth. The guy thought that he would not be understood, but Bell said that he knows everything. Afterwards, the guy confessed that he was also reincarnated, and in this life his name is Bell. Here he is, like a peasant. Afterwards, the boy shouted joyfully, realizing that Bell was also from Earth. Bell said that the boy could stop speaking respectfully to him because they were the same age here. Takaru started to say that this was the first time he talked to someone in this world. Bell was surprised that the guy survived here at all, that he said about the supplies in the submarine. Chappelle wanted to ride this thing. Bell asked permission to go inside and look around his ship. Takeru said it was no problem at all. The girl ran towards the ship, and Bell shouted at her not to break anything and not to use magic inside. Hearing this, Takeru realized that he should have asked Mogu for other things. Bell guessed that the boy asked for a submarine in this world, but there were still 2 wishes left. The other 2 he used to automatically repair the functions of his ship and equip the equipment inside. But the catch was that the guy couldn't use the auto repair function even if there was enough fuel and electricity inside. His body also couldn't use magic because it was the same as in his past life. Bell said that it was very strange, because if the guy got it from God, he should be able to use the functions. Takeru watched what was happening behind the guy's back at that moment. When Bell turned around, he saw the submarine hovering in the air. Above was his sister, to whom the guy immediately shouted to stop using her magic. As it turned out, there was a sign inside that asked to put magic inside. When Chappelle did this, the submarine immediately rose up, which was amazing. Takuru also noticed that the auto-repair function worked as well. Bed said that she must be moving with magic, which the guy does not have at all. Takuru sat down on the ground and said that the truth was really cruel because he thought that all this was useless in this case. Because he can't use magic, he can't use the 3 wishes. The guy also added that he should have guessed after everything that this world is based on magic. If he could have thought about it, he would have wished for completely different things or would have been much smarter. Bell said that it was too early to despair because the guy was lucky and met them. After that, Bell added that it was time for them to get off this desert island together. The young man's eyes turned to the hero. Bell also said that this world is many times bigger than the boy can imagine. After that, the young man urged Takaru not to give up so early, but to just follow them. Chappelle came closer to them. She smiled and said that the guy could stay the night. It was her thanks for letting her play inside his submarine. The guy smiled. They soon reached the house. The door through which Bell and Chappelle entered was immediately looked at by the mother and younger brother. They saw a guest, whom Bell immediately introduced, saying that it was Takaru. Takeru looked around and realized that he saw more people in front of him. He felt warmth, and then his mother noticed that he looked tired. She prepared a bath and invited him to go first. Suddenly, the door opened sharply, and Saranilla ran in. The girl turned to Bell and asked him to go with her to the store, because she and Aval had big problems. There was a buzz of crowds in the street. Saranilla ran with Bell to the house and shouted that she was bringing a boy. Aval raised his hand and asked to hurry, as a guest was waiting for him there. The boy recognized this entire crowd, which were half-beast people. The man bowed his head to Bell and said that they had decided to rely on the kindness of the young man and had come here for help. Bell said that they would do everything, but first he wanted to know how an entire nation ended up in such hopelessness. Then the man began his story, saying that a few days ago they were attacked by a group of orcs. They were separated from each other and began to run. In the end, Herbal was reunited with his daughter again near this village. Herbal said they were able to get back together, but they no longer have a place to call home. He added that they will be able to repay in the future, and they have no one else to ask. Bell turned to his friend, asking what Aval thought of all this. The man said that these people could be offered to live in a city that would be underground. Afterwards, Aval told Bell to slow down a bit, as he remembered that the inhabitants of the dungeon had not even begun construction yet. Their dwelling was, of course, large, but right now there was not even a proper infrastructure. In addition, the guy added that they will need a lot of resources to build a house for all these creatures from scratch. All this complicates matters many times over. Takaru appeared from behind and told Herbal that he had brought some food for him and his people. The boy asked them to help themselves. Bell apologized to the guy, saying that he was a guest, but he had to help. Takaru said that there was nothing wrong with it, since he was just paying the guy back with kindness. Bell thought that if they had enough land, they could move nearby. Suddenly, it dawned on the guy. The young man looked at him in surprise. He remembered the uninhabited island that he had asked Takaru about right away. Bell said that it was quite big, there was a mountain and a lake, and besides, there was no one there. Bell addressed the half-beast, calling him the head of the tribe, and immediately offered him to settle their entire company on an uninhabited island, where there were all the amenities for life. Bell said there would be no enemies there, which reassured Irbla. But the man didn't understand one thing: would his people be able to live in such an environment? Aval said that the beast was right. The boy thought that it was really cruel to leave them alone and in a completely unknown land. Bell said that everything would be fine as he thought. The boy started to walk away, and then said that he would go with them and teach them useful skills such as building, hunting, and the basics of trade. Bell thought that this was a good plan, and then began to ask the others for their opinion. Afterwards, Bell smiled broadly and asked the head of the tribe whether his people wanted to develop the uninhabited island, of which they themselves would become the masters for some time. The moon brightly illuminated everyone present. The next day, Herbal began to wake up his little daughter Eliza. He was picking up some fresh fruit that they were going to have for breakfast and said that he was about to, I have something important to announce. Bell stood on a small rise and greeted everyone who had gathered, wishing them a good morning. The guy immediately introduced himself, saying that he was a peasant in this village and his name was Bell. Bell continued, saying that today he had gathered all these half-animals to tell them an important piece of news. They called it the Desert Island Reclamation Project. The crowd began to mutter, and Serenilla, who was standing next to her husband, immediately asked Aval what Bell was talking about. The merchant said that he didn't even need to be asked, but he had a feeling that he was dealing with a swindler. Someone raised their hand. The girl wanted to know if the island was really uninhabited. The girl also added that she is sure that there are many animals among them who are not ready to accept this project. However, Bell waved his thumb and said she was right. Bell had some option, and with the hand he raised earlier, the boy pointed at Takaru. Bell said that they could all ask the details about the island from this man. Bell approached the boy and told him that everything would be fine. The boy demanded that Takira only tell him about his experience of surviving on the island where he and Chappelle found him. However, the guy said that it was very unexpected for him. When he came out to the crowd of animals, Takira was worried, hearing the muttering. After that, they gradually began to address him. The first question came from the head of the tribe. Ibril asked Takura about what life was like for the guy on the island and whether he felt any danger. It was also important to know about dangerous creatures, if there were any. The guy, nervously rubbing his hand, said that he had never met anyone on the island. There were also no dangers when the guy lived there. By the way, the island was completely empty. The guy said there was only a mountain, a lake, a forest, and the sea. So they would indeed need to build a shelter for themselves, and Tucker could assure that there were plenty of fish and edible plants on the island. Afterwards, Tucker said that he thought the island was pretty nice once he got used to living there. The guy shed a little tear because he had been there for a long time, which had passed. Herbal heard the guy perfectly, and then began to address everyone else. The leader said that they heard the guy perfectly, so there should be no problems on the island, and there will be no invaders. People began to look at each other and whisper, saying that they had never lived by the sea before. Bell thought that for creatures that had spent all their time on land, such a move would be either difficult or impossible. The animals continued to mutter, and then Herbal raised his voice, saying that this was a good option. The man replied that they were the ones who were driven out of their hometown, and now they have such a chance, where they can live peacefully. Herbal said that they had never really lived on an island before, but what Bell offered them was an option to live together without worrying about dangers anymore. Afterwards, he looked piercingly at everyone and firmly said that it was for this very reason that he considered this a good chance. And then Herbal shouted, telling everyone to believe and follow him, as before. People were really inspired by this speech. Many began to say that they understood their leader, and they also supported the idea of doing everything possible to stay together. People began to rejoice that their tribe would soon become great again. Bell looked up and told the chief that it was really cool. Herbal said that he hadn't made such a speech in a long time. Some animals began to approach Bell. They asked if they could visit the island in question because they wanted to see it first. Bell said that Tucker would be happy to help them. Bell, seeing the guy's reaction, said that this should be quite interesting and cool, since Takira will be able to practice controlling a submarine. Aval supported Takaru, asked Bell not to bully him too much. Bell said that he was not being rude at all, but rather, he supported the guy. Aval also closed his shop for today because he had something to talk about with the head of the tribe. The boy approached him and asked if he could sell him some wool from the Sirata tribe. Bell shouted, pointing his finger at Aval, that he was too clever because the boy wanted the wool too. Aval said that he was still first, and the chief asked if they could really sell the fur. Aval said that he had done some calculations and that one roll of wool from this tribe would fetch about 5 silver coins, which was quite a good price on the market. Herbal looked at his hand and said that it was indeed a good price. Aval explained that their wool was finer than the fur of a long-haired goat, so it would be prized by artisans. Afterwards, Aval said with a smile on his face that he could even give half of the proceeds for this material. The head of the tribe said he agreed, but on one condition. The man said that Aval should give a portion of the proceeds that was due to him to Bull as well. Then Herbal turned and asked the boy to accept it as thanks for his work and care. Bell chuckled and told Aval that he had heard it all himself. The guy also added that he was hoping for some great stuff from Mr. Genius Merchant himself. After Herbal said that first they would have to shear all the inhabitants. The Beulah family took out all the wool scissors they had and began to shear the tribe. Bell finally sat down again, thinking that everyone was coping without him. The guy was watching the silence around him when suddenly, as always, he heard the sound of footsteps nearby. It was a small old man, looking like a gnome in a funny cap. The grandfather apologized to the boy for interrupting his rest and then asked for some work. Bell was surprised to see a gnome there. The boy asked where he came from and how long he had lived there. The gnome raised his hands and said that he had been with the Sirata tribe from the very beginning. Bell thought about what kind of work he could give this dwarf. He thought that he should work on the island development project, but then he remembered something else. Bell remembered that the dwarves were supposed to be famous for their blacksmithing, but the dwarf immediately refused the offer, saying that he didn't understand forging at all. When Bell asked what the dwarf could do, the old man proudly said he was a leather craftsman. Bell was even more pleased when he learned that the man could work with such material. The gnome also said that everything he was wearing was made by him. The old man also added that this was the only thing he could do, so he needed to help with something. Bell patted the man on the shoulder and told him not to worry. The boy added that a lot of people would probably want such a craftsman, but unfortunately there was not a single leather workshop in the area. But Bell also said he had a ton of raw leather in his warehouse that he kept on purpose. It is for this reason that the guy may offer him to become a personal master. Bell also added that he would pay the master for his work, and even if he needed it, the young man would easily build him and his family a house nearby. The old man was a little doubtful whether such an outcome would be normal. Bell decided to take the initiative into his own hands. He said confidently that he wanted such a master. The old man agreed and they shook hands. The dwarf said that it was a great idea and he would be happy to become Bell's personal master of leather and leather goods. Everyone listened and watched in surprise at what was happening. After that, Takeru returned. Bell immediately greeted the guy. Bell started asking how it all went, and then learned that transporting people on a submarine had been a real nerve-wracking experience. But, as Bell said, this world really was huge. Bell asked Tucker what he intended to do next. In response to this question, Tucker stated his intention to go on a voyage across the open sea. Moreover, he added that he is irresistibly drawn by the desire to see with his own eyes all the wonders and diversity of this world, to get to know its unexplored corners and to feel its unique atmosphere. However, Bell jumped to his feet and told Tucker that his plans might not be as easy to implement as they might seem at first glance, that the reality of sea travel was full of challenges. After this, Bell gave him a detailed account of many aspects of the sea adventure. Bell told him about the crew, the pirates, the expenses, and the supplies. Bell paused and stated that before embarking on such ambitious plans, Tucker needed to gain a deeper understanding of common sense. Bell declared that he would under no circumstances allow any fool who did not understand the full responsibility and seriousness of the situation to become captain of the ship. Bell then announced his intention to go into town the next day to take care of urgent matters, and invited Takeru to accompany him so that he could see the world and gain experience. Bell gave Takeru a sincere smile and asked him to share tomorrow's adventure with him, to spend time together and strengthen their camaraderie. In response to Bell's relaxed and confident speech, the guy couldn't help but laugh. He was amused by his comrade's light and easy tone, as well as his unshakable confidence in success, creating the impression that all difficulties would be overcome with ease and without much effort. The dwarf who had taken a job as a leather craftsman for Bell ran out of the enclosure and said that he had finished his task. These were clothes for Takeru, who was worried that the gift was too expensive. Bell said the guy didn't have to worry because they were using things that were lying around. Everything looked expensive because Bella had an excellent and skilled craftsman. Mother came out and said that she was very glad of such a strong friendship among the boys, but they could have chosen a better time and place, because they were almost in town. The children asked if they would buy souvenirs. Everyone looked ahead with a smile. The children wished them good luck. After they took off on the large dragon, Alterara was standing somewhere in the distance. The other girls chuckled, asking if the girl felt lonely because Belle left her behind. Alterara immediately said that this was not so. She began to explain that she was just glad he had finally found a friend his own age. Bell always seemed like he couldn't open his heart completely to anyone. After they arrived, they stopped briefly at the large gate, where Bell stated his name and the reason for his presence: purchasing supplies. This was to allow them to pass through the checkpoint of the city of Beliari. A small man was studying the list of goods that Bell was going to buy. He exhaled and said that this year there was also a guy who was a mega wholesaler. Since Takaru didn't know anything and the controller saw this, he immediately began to explain that Bell shops like crazy every year. He tries to empty every store. The guy was surprised. Afterwards, the gates began to open. Bell said that they should visit the market first. Takeru raised his hand and said that he was not strong enough to carry a lot of things. Bell turned sharply to Tucker, flashing a friendly smile, and assured him in a calm voice that he would place all of their acquired items in his magical barrier so that the boy would not have to worry about anything. Takeru, with a look of complete incomprehension on his face, had no idea what kind of magical barrier he was talking about. Bell decided to demonstrate it to him and explained that it was one of his abilities that he had received after reincarnation. Bell grabbed Takeru's hand and hurriedly said that they didn't have much time left, since their plan was to go to all the planned stores in the area in order to make all the necessary purchases. They soon became immersed in the bustling atmosphere of the city and spent a considerable part of the day enthusiastically strolling through its noisy streets, enjoying the atmosphere and looking at the windows of the numerous shops. They looked at the various products presented in the stores with great interest, carefully studying the assortment. Soon became clear that in many of the stores visited, Bell had wisely placed orders in advance, which significantly sped up the shopping process and saved them from having to waste time waiting. Satisfied with the purchases they had made and the orders they had collected, they continued their journey through the city with renewed vigor. They were heading to the next point in their planned route and were very surprised. A large church began to appear on the horizon. Bell reported that this was the place where they would try to find suitable candidates to crew their submarine. Takaru, genuinely surprised by Bell's statement, wondered if he would be allowed to freely visit a place like a church. To this remark, the young man Bell, with a slight smile on his face, simply replied that he maintained constant communication with one of the local sisters. Soon the door was opened by their sister and she greeted the guests, singling out Bell. Bell thanked the girl who was the director and asked her how things were going at the orphanage. The girl said that everything was fine, thanks to the guy's donations. Bell turned around and said that he helped run the place and even made some tools for the building. Takeru was amazed. When they walked inside, they were offered a snack, miso soup poured into bowls and small buns served with it. Takaru was shocked when he saw a familiar dish. Bell smiled and said that it wasn't exactly mimo. The soup was called gozen and wasn't made from miso, but it tasted similar. Takaru said that the taste was really nostalgic. Takeru stood up from his seat after he finished. He immediately entered a room where there were two boys. They looked at him unkindly for a moment, but Takaru just wanted to say that they cooked deliciously. The principal immediately came up to the boys and apologized for the girl's rudeness, but Bell just smiled and said that everything was fine. The guy added that the girl was who she was. Takeru, meanwhile, got down to business and leaned towards the guys. He said that he wanted to offer the boys to become cooks on his ship. He also added that they would not be sailing soon, but the offer was relevant. The girl turned around and said that if the guy was talking about his ship, he was probably the captain of it. She also said that the guy didn't look very reliable and threw a bun at him. The guy said that he is a complete newbie now and needs to learn a lot in this business. The guy also added that he will definitely not disappoint the guys who join his crew. Afterwards, he said that it was for this reason that Takaru would be able to show them many amazing things that they wouldn't be able to see in this orphanage. The boy immediately became enthusiastic, talking about how he wanted to see the amazing things in the world. He asked if someone like him could really see all of this. Takeru smiled and said that he really could, so he suggested doing it together. After that, the guys started jumping, saying that they agreed to see this whole world. Bell turned around and said that's how it happened. He asked if the principal was okay with it, but his sister said that the kids had already decided that they were going, so she didn't mind. As they left, Takaru waved to the children. He thought he would have a hard time learning because these guys wanted to go as soon as possible. Afterwards, Bell said that in that case they needed to visit the city capital. He explained that there was no one strong in the area who could fight the pirates and protect the children at the same time. It is for this reason that they are better off considering all candidates on the spot. Afterwards, Bell smiled and asked what Takeru had decided in the end. Without any delay, the guy said that he was, of course, ready to move on. Bell said that the captain had a great attitude, and Takeru, in turn, added that it was thanks to Bell. Late in the evening, everyone was already asleep. There was a knock on Bell's room. The boy sat and studied the book, and then thought about who could be disturbing him at such a late hour. Bell closed the book and said that the door to his room was open. Alterara appeared at the door of the room in her nightclothes and asked if they could talk alone for a bit. The girl said that she heard the news that Bell and Takeru were going to the royal capital. Bell replied that they needed to visit several places to find a team for the crew. The boy also thought that he could use his warehouse as temporary housing for the squad. He invited Alterara to join them. But before the guy could even finish speaking, Alterara immediately said that she couldn't do it. The girl said that after all, she was an adventurer and would soon have to go on a mission. The girl also said that she didn't know if she would still be here when Bell came back. That's why she wanted to thank him right now for the words he told her. The girl said she was happy when Bell called her dark hair wonderful, something no one had ever done before. She also expressed gratitude for the fact that she can now look forward with pride. Bell said it was just wonderful. Alterara began to raise her hand, saying that if Bell had also been an adventurer, then everything could have ended differently. Bell had told her that Alterara should come back whenever she felt lonely. The girl looked at the guy in surprise, not expecting him to say that right now. Bell said he would always be here. Alterara said that Bell is a very nice guy. Even though he is younger than her, she just wants to thank him again. The next day came, and the boys were already out on the street. Bell said they would get there, to the capital on Takeru's submarine. The guy said it was faster on the Dragon, but Bell said the sea route was much more convenient. Bell said that they would first take the submarine to a small island near the royal capital and then continue their journey on his boat. The guy didn't understand why they were ignoring the port. Bell lowered his head and said sadly that the only ones who controlled the port were the mafia. Takeru couldn't even imagine that public order was so bad in the capital. As it turned out, a gnome had been running after them all this time, and he called out to his master. Out of breath, he approached the boys and said that he had finally managed to catch up with them. There was another gnome standing next to him, only much younger. The boy immediately said that it was an honor for him to meet Bell. His father explained that his son wanted to become a master's apprentice. The father asked to take his son to the capital when the boys left. Bell was not against it and said that he agreed. The gnome boy introduced himself, saying that his name was Denko. The father shouted at Denko to watch himself and not to cause trouble on Master Bell's journey. The boy scratched his head and said that he would obey the master. Soon, they were sailing on a boat, and very fast. Denko said that he had no idea that the guy could even make boats. Denko thought Bell was very cool. Bell didn't hide that it made him laugh, and he also said that as long as there was black sand, the master was ready to bet that Denko would be able to make one, because dwarves can use magic too. Denko was happy and said that he would try to make one when they returned home. Takeru was not sure about trusting rare resources to newbies. Bell shouted to the boys to look ahead, because they were almost there. In front of them lay the royal capital of Slenvik. Bell smiled and said that it was a seaside city with a history of 300 years. He said that the capital had a different atmosphere than the cities on the mainland. Afterwards, the guy suggested that they first need to clear out the warehouse and then they could sleep there. Denko raised his hand and said that they could trust him with this task, because then they would be able to find the team faster. Bell asked if the boy was sure, which Denko, as it turned out, was not. He said that by the time the boys returned, everything would be sparkling. Bell agreed and handed the gnome the key. Denko waved his hand at the guys, and Bell took Takeru with him, saying that they would go to the port. The guy got scared. He knew, because there was a mafia there, to which Bell immediately calmed the guy down. It was not worth being a coward when looking for a team. Takeru asked if they could really find experts there. Bell said he wasn't quite sure, and that was why he decided to ask a friend who lived here in the capital. Bell was talking about Barvant, the president of the Baziwoder company. When Takeru heard that Bell knew the president of the company, he became curious about how they became friends. Bell said that they should be careful because there were a lot of people there. Soon, he heard a voice behind him. It was his old acquaintance, who immediately recognized the boy. The man said that it was a pleasant surprise for him because he would never have thought that they would be able to meet in the royal capital. The man thanked the boy for repairing their ship. Bell asked Legir if their boss was here now. The guy said that Barvand is a very busy man, but the guys can leave him a message. Afterwards, Bell said that there was no need to do this. He asked Laguerre if the man knew of any places where he could find a good team for his friend. When Laguerre heard about this, he smiled and said that the boys could hire adventurer merchants. The guy also said that they trade while sailing and would be a good choice. Takeru said that he didn't even know about such a profession. Bell said they would like to go see them right now, and Laguerre helpfully said he would take the boys to the group's habitat. Suddenly, Takeru called out to Bell, saying that something was happening up ahead. Bell raised his head. He saw a ship burning in the distance, with people gathering around it. They quickly came closer. The girl was crying. She was on her knees, saying that her father wouldn't last long. Bell asked what had happened to him, and Laguerre said that it was the work of pirates. The girl shouted that they needed a doctor, to which the man who was nearby replied that the doctors here only treated the nobility and the rich, so he couldn't help her in any way. Bell approached the girl. Bell appeared nearby and said that he could help the man. The girl looked at him with tears in her eyes, after which the boy said that he had some medical skills. Looking at the arm, Bell said they couldn't save it and would have to amputate it. Suddenly, the girl, full of anxiety and despair, pounced on the boy, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. She exclaimed that if he did what he had planned, her father would never be able to swim again in his life. The girl added that her father was an indomitable adventurer, and depriving him of the opportunity to swim would be an irreparable blow to him. Bell responded calmly, and in a tone that he fully understood how difficult it was for her. However, despite the sympathy and understanding, Bell said that, unfortunately, in the current situation there is nothing more precious and important than human life itself. At this point, the man, gradually returning to consciousness, offered a sincere apology in a weak voice for his daughter. Hearing her father's familiar voice, the girl could not hold back a joyful exclamation. Her heart was filled with hope and relief from the realization that her father was alive and beginning to come to his senses. The man, gathering his strength, said that if there was no other way out in the current situation, then he would agree to any measures. In the end, nothing in this world would matter if he died. The man then said that he apologized again for disturbing him, but he wanted to ask the boy to look at the rest of the crew, who might also have been injured. Bell began giving orders, asking Laguerre to bring any clean clothes he had. He called Takeru. Afterwards, the guy turned to Tucker with a smile and a knife in his hand, and said that the guy would help him here. Soon everyone was saved thanks to their joint efforts. Bell crossed his arms and thanked Laguerre for what he had done. The man smiled and said no need, it was an emergency. Afterwards, Bell told Laguerre to give Barvodnu his regards. The man began to walk away, looking back after a few meters and nodding his head. Takeru was sitting around the corner of the house, shaking with fear. Bell leaned over to him and said that they had to go back. Takeru carefully began to get up from his seat, coming to his senses. Afterwards, they walked along the pier, and Bell said that seafaring is always fraught with danger. Takeru was loaded for this very reason because the guy said that he realized it today. Bell laughed and said that the boys seemed to have lost interest in swimming. Takeru replied that he should have been scared, of course, but that was not the case. All it meant to the boy was that he had to think about it. He had to figure out how he could work on himself better if he didn't want his crew to be in danger. After all, he is the captain of the crew. Bell was glad of what he had just heard. The boy smiled and gently caught up with Takeru, hitting him on the back and telling him to try his best. After a while, the children told Bell that they were going to church. The girl says that they promised to have breakfast with her sister and the other children. Bell puts his hands on his hips and agrees with the children, then says that he will join later. He still needs to discuss the reconstruction plan with his sister. The children agree, then the young man waves them off. Then Kayaji comes to Bell and calls the boy by name. He asks if Bell has seen the captain anywhere. He has not been able to find him since the morning. Bell asks the elf again if he is talking about Takeru. The protagonist thinks and says that he hasn't seen the pixies since the morning. The elf agrees with the young man that he hasn't seen them either. Then Bell says that everything is fine and he found Takeru. The elf thanks the boy. After some time, the young man goes outside and goes to the place where Takeru is. The boy was sitting on a bench and playing with little pixies. Bell came up to the boy and said that this is where Takeru was. The boy was surprised that Bell found him and then wished him good morning. One of the pixies greets Bell and says that they are currently teaching Takeru many things about them. Pixie tells Bell about her ability to heal with magic, emphasizing that it will make traveling safer. Bell admits that this reassures him. Takeru smiles and says that he also asked the pixie for another favor. He is thinking about drawing a map on the journey. He points to the pixies and says that it would be easiest for them to scout the area around them. Belle smiles and says that it is quite clever of the boy, then calls Takaru by name. Then, 2 more pixies return to Tucker. The girls fly and call his name, then say that they have returned. Another pixie says that they remembered the royal capital as a young man and asked. Takeru thanks the pixies and asks if they can draw what they remember on the paper. The pixies agree with the boy, then take a pen and begin drawing a map. Belle looks at all this and thinks that Takaru is feeling more and more confident in his role as captain. At this moment, the pixies were drawing a map on paper, drawing a staircase and a road that leads straight to the sea. Belle recalls that when he first met Takaru, he didn't think he would be like this because, at that moment, he really surprised him. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by the scream of the pixie, who was shouting that she said that this drawing was wrong. They argued with each other about how there was a department store on one corner, and another pixie said there was a bakery there because she could smell bread as she flew past it. The evil pixies turned to Tucker and asked him who he thought was right. The boy sweated at the question and said he didn't know because he hadn't seen the area. Belle smirked and said that Takeru didn't think the future looked a little bleak. The boy agreed with Belle, and at that moment he asked the pixies to stop fighting. Suddenly, another pixie started calling Takaru from afar. She was flying at high speed and said that they were in big trouble. The little one crashed right into the young man's forehead. Belle asked why there was such panic. Takaru grabbed his forehead with his hands at that moment. The little pixie turned to Belle and said about the church, namely that the church was in trouble. Takaru began to wipe his forehead and asked what it meant that the church was in great trouble. The girl replied that many people had gathered in front of the church, and each of them was very angry. Belle was looking at them at that moment and thinking about the ongoing rebellion and what caused it. Belle interrupted them and said that it was not the time to chat and that they needed to go to church right away because he was very worried about the children. Takaru jumped up and said that he would call Kayaji and the others immediately. At this time, a piercing scream was heard in the streets. People asked for food and then asked why people were silent because they should hurry and feed them. At this moment, they were shaking some leaflets. The girls from the church tried to ask the rebellious people to calm down. Then they shouted to the director that they could not hold back any longer. Suddenly, Belle, Takaru, and the others appeared behind the church minister. The young man ordered everyone else to quickly go inside the church. He then built a wall around the church. People were knocking on the wall and didn't understand what was happening and where the wall came from. They assumed that the young man did it. Belle closed the door and told the others that everything was okay now. The church minister thanked Belle for saving them and said that he really did it. Then, the young man went into the room and asked what was going on. The church lady said that, to be honest, she wasn't quite sure, but all these people had come here. They were interrupted by the elf Kaaji and said that about those people. He holds out a leaflet and says that he thinks they came here because of what is written on this leaflet. Belle looks at the leaflet and asks what it is. Kaachi reads the inscription on the leaflet, which says that they can come to the church and get free food. This is what was written on this flyer. He is more than sure that this was spread by someone who knew what Belle did for these people. The boy sighed and said that it was some kind of elaborate prank. They must have been mad at him or something. Kayaji said that it was probably the work of the mafia. They were the only ones who could do something like that. Belle clutches the leaflet and says that this is most likely true. If you think about it, this whole situation is problematic. He scratches his chin and wonders what he should do with all this now. Kayaji says that if Belle asks him, then... Clutching his bow, he says, "How about we kill all those who lurk in the shadows and see who will have the last laugh?" There was a terrifying expression of hatred and contempt on his face. Takeru shouted Kayachi's name and asked if he would really go and shoot everyone with his bow. The young man asked the captain not to worry because he had memorized each of their faces. Even if they got lost in the crowd, he was sure that his arrow would reach them. Takaru grabbed Kayachi's clothes and began to beg him to calm down. Belle thought that Kayachi seemed serious. Then some girl laughed from the side. She sat on the doorway and started laughing really hard. The girl laughed and said that Kaachi's blood was really hot for an elf who grew up in the forest. The young man turned around and asked the girl what she was. The girl jumped from the doorway. The young man said that he had set up a barrier around the entire perimeter of the church from where the girl entered. She looked closely and said that it turned out to be a barrier. The girl then turns to Kayachi and calls him an elf, and then asks if he knows that the problem cannot be solved by his method. Even if he kills the instigators, the rest will not calm down because they are hungry. So, the only thing he has to do to solve this problem is to fill his stomachs. That's the solution to the problem. She turns to Belle and asks if she said it right. The young man sighed and agreed with the girl. Besides, she's not sure what to think of the assistant dragging his master around like that. Kaji sees Takaru clinging to the boy's belt. The elf turned to the captain and said that he was very sorry. Takaru said that he was just glad that the boy had regained his composure. Then Belle turned to the girl and asked who she was. The girl smirked and asked the boy not to strain himself because she was not going to fight the boy. Her name is Sani, but some call her the Eternal Witch. And today she came here to invite Belle to a tea party. The young man says that, as the girl could notice, he is a little busy at the moment. The girl asks in that case to just leave everything to the boy who is standing aside. She is sure that he will handle everything perfectly. Takaru gets scared and asks if they really leave everything to him. The girl replies that she is sure that Takaru is also a talented person, so he should believe in himself more. Belle said that he is already saying that he will not go with her. The girl smiles and says that the tea party is being organized by her friend and he is very well known in these parts, so she can assure that the party will be very useful for the young man. She looks at Belle carefully and says, smirking, that even now he does not want to go with her. The boy asks if the girl's friend is connected to the mafia. She giggles and says that you can say that he is and is not connected at the same time. That's exactly what she thinks. Belle thinks that the girl could be sent away. Besides, she teases him a lot. He is very intrigued. The protagonist exhales and says that he agrees. He will go with the girl to the tea party, or whatever it is. He then apologizes to Takeru and says that he will have to leave this place in his hands. The young man is surprised. Belle then approaches Kayaji and Denko to help Tucker maintain the place. Kayaji agrees, and Denko asks Belle, calling him bro, to take care of himself. Belle then turns to Takaru and says that his barrier will be broken after he leaves, and he is sure that the people outside will try to break through, so he must do something to prevent it. Takaru is very surprised and scared. Kaji approaches him and asks if the boy is okay. Takaru sighs and then slaps his hands across his face. The elf is surprised by this action of his captain. Takaru tries to calm himself down and says that everything is fine. He calls the sister of the church and tells her to use every ingredient she finds in the church and also asks her to cook some food with the children as soon as possible. The woman said that she understood the young man. He in turn turned to Kayaji and Denko and told them to follow him. Sani tells Belle that his friends are interesting and he thanks her. He then asks where the party is, but Sani replies that he will soon find out for himself. After a while, they reach the right place. The girl says welcome to the boy and points to a cafe called Enjoyable Time with Auntie Gurin. The young man asked if this place was a shop. Sani replied in the affirmative and added that she also lived a luxurious life here as she worked as a waitress here. The young man looks around and thinks that this is some exotic place. Then a man approaches the girl and asks if this is the young man from Belle's rumors. She agrees. The girl introduces the protagonist to her friend Dizel, an older man who suggests that she address him simply as Corey. The protagonist thanks him and calls him Mr. Corey. Then he saw a teapot and a cup floating in the air and knocking against each other. The young man asked if these were magical objects, and the man answered in the affirmative and said that as Belle could already see, Auntie Gorin was already brewing tea for them right now. The man said that she was the owner of this establishment, but it was very rare to meet her here. The girl also said that she had not heard her voice for the last 100 years. Belle said that this auntie was very strange. Sani winked and said that Gorin was indeed an eccentric person. Even the tea she made was no less eccentric. The girl then asks Belle to look towards the teapot and said that at the moment, Aunt Gorin is preparing tea for him. Then the young man notices the teapot and remembers that he had exactly the same one in his previous life. The boy is surprised to recognize the smell of tea, and the girl explains that Gorin evokes memories that help to prepare the perfect drink. The teapot turns out to be magical, capable of brewing tea endlessly. The man says that by pouring tea into the young man's cup, Auntie Gorin shows her love, so the young man should be grateful and drink. Belle says that he understands everything and in that case he cannot refuse. Then he thinks and says that even if he can't see her, he thinks he should still express his gratitude. So he thanks Auntie Gorin. Then he asks her to accept this as his gratitude. Sani asks the boy what it is. The man asks if it is a tea cake. The boy says it is just something his younger sister made, so he hopes they will like it. Suddenly the plate of desserts flies up. Sani tells Gurin that it is a dirty trick and asks her not to eat it all herself. The girl calls Belle and asks him to get another cake like that. The young man asks her not to worry because he has another one with him. Then the man walks past them and says that when the young man finishes, he can come into the next room to discuss his pressing problems. After some time, the young man enters another room and apologizes for the wait. The man says that it is not worth it because he should apologize for Sani's behavior when she saw the sweets. He then shows the boy some men and asks if he recognizes these guys. Belle denies it and says that it is the first time he has seen them. The man said he understood. Then he said that it meant those stupid people acted on their own initiative. Belle did not understand what the man was talking about. The man then asked the men if they had trained their young carefully. They must make sure that no one in their families touched this boy again. He looks sternly and says that this is the last warning. The men answer that they understand. Then Mr. Corey says that this is all and they can go. The men bow and then ask to take their leave. Belle turned to Corey and asked what just happened. The man said that the young man had just seen the heads of 4 large mafia families in the capital, and how could he notice the man had warned each of them? The man Corey blinks and says that this is why the mafia will not give him any problems anymore. Belle thought that Sani said that Corey is quite famous, but the boy did not expect such a famous one. Belle narrowed his eyes and said that Grandpa was something. The man made a sweet face and said that it was not such a big deal. He said that besides, he could always discuss problems with an old man like him. A young guy like Belle should only do things that are typical for young guys. The young man smiles and thanks the man, then says that he will take all this into account. The man said he appreciated the boy's candor. Belle said he thought it was a great honor to receive such praise from Corey. After returning, Belle greets Denko and a weakened Takaru, who can barely stand. Belle asks what's wrong with him, and Takaru replies that it's fatigue, stress, and fear. Belle sympathizes, saying that it must be really tough. Kaichi said that the boy had to see it for himself. Captain Takaru was acting so inspiring that he was so touched. Takaru asked him to stop it because it was so embarrassing. Anyway, the people who came this morning said they would also help with the church repairs. Belle said that was just great. He turned to Tucker and said he had done a great job calming the crowd. The young man replied that they were on edge because they were hungry, but in reality they were really good people. Takaru then asked the boy how his tea party went. Belle thought about it and said that it was like the adult world, he thought. Takaru didn't understand what Belle was talking about and asked what it meant. After a while, Belle sat down in a chair and proposed to discuss the plan for the reconstruction of the church. He said that he had already defined the role of everyone in this project. Belle turns to Denko and says he will take care of the food. If there are not enough dishes, they can simply be made with earth magic. Denko clenches his fists and tells Belle to leave it to him. Belle looks at the fairies and says that they will be responsible for communication. They are very surprised that the young man has work for them too. Belle says that Kaichi will eliminate the disorder. If the situation requires it, he can use force. The boy agrees. Takaru asks the boy to do without it. Then Belle turns to Tucker, hands him a roll of paper, and says that he will be in charge of the reconstruction. The young man is surprised by this. Takeru asks if this shouldn't be Belle's job. The boy says that he has other things to take care of. Takaru asks if that could be it. That Belle wants to shift her responsibilities to him because it's too much trouble. Belle asks now how the young man has spoken. However, he hits Takaru on the head with the blueprint roll and says that he said he thought of everything. Instead, he is going to meet with a man who will support the church. Takaru asks why the boy doesn't do it himself. Belle says that he has had many things to think about since meeting his sire. As he thought, this kind of work should be done by an adult with a lot of experience. Kachi asked what Belle was planning. The boy replied that he was thinking of hiring him, the merchant adventurer Blarney. Denko said that if he remembered correctly. Well, it was his young man who met him in the port of Aniki. The young man agrees and thinks about how he feels. Kaichi says if he was that badly hurt, he might as well retire from his job. He wonders if he would agree to that. Belle says he won't know unless he asks, but the problem is, he has no idea where his house is. Suddenly, a girl's voice is heard from the side, saying that if that's all it is, then she knows where his house is. This girl turns out to be Sani, who sat down next to Takaru. Everyone screamed in fear. The girl laughed at the guy's excellent reaction. Belle asked the girl where she came from in the first place. The girl snuggled up to Tucker and said it was just a friendly visit in the middle of a walk. Then Sani says that at least she was seen at the port. Kachi asks the girl to tell him how she knew about it, and then he moves Takaru away from the girl. She laughs and says that one should not underestimate the power of idle gossip. The girl asks if the elf really does not believe him. He agreed and said that gossip was not a reliable source of information. Sani looked at the young man without smiling. She smirks and asks what this thick-headed elf thinks of himself. Kayachi said he was simply stating a fact. There was a slight tension between them. Belle said that at least they had a lead. He suggested that they all try to use it. The girl turned around and agreed, saying that the boy should have done this from the beginning. The girl suggests buying fresh fruits at the market while they look for friends. Belle agrees but asks Sani not to tease them too much, since they are serious. Sani laughs and asks if he really thinks she is guilty, since her friends are amused by her jokes. After some time, the young man walked along the streets of the city and thought that now he should think about where to start his search. He looks at the juicy apples in the shop. The young man reaches for an apple, but suddenly a woman's hand also reaches for the same apple, and they touch. The young man apologizes and sees a girl in front of him. Then he recognizes her as Navari. He says that to think that he could find her so quickly. It was good that he met her here, because he was looking for her. The girl asked what he wanted from her. The young man said that he wanted the girl to take him to her father. She frowned at the boy and said that her father was still not in the best shape. Belle replied that the girl should just let him say hello and check on him because he was worried about his condition. The girl replied that he had lost his energy after the accident that day. Belle said that he understood everything. After a while, the young man sits at Navari's father's bedside. He says that overall everything is fine, but he is sure that the cut still hurts a lot, so he gives the man medicine to ease the pain. The man gives the medicine to his daughter and thanks Belle for helping the family. Belle waves off the thanks, notices the fuss around them, and asks if they really plan to move. The man agreed and said that he had rented the place to work, but now he would no longer need it. Belle sighed and said that this meant that the man was really going to quit his job. The man agreed in return. He admitted that the situation was hopeless. He was seriously injured, his ship had burned, and his reputation had been badly damaged. Meanwhile, Navari, peeling an apple for her father, listened to him ponder finding a new job. Belle says it couldn't have come at a better time. Navari and the man looked at the boy questioningly. Belle says he actually came here to offer him a job. The man said he understood and then became happy and said that in that case he would certainly agree. Navari jumped up and said if her father was really serious, even without knowing her details, he would agree to this. The man asks what the Navari are talking about. They owe too much to Belle. The girl says she knows, but it's all a little scary. The man asks what Belle wants from him. The boy replies that it is nothing special, he just wants the man to look after the church. The man said that given Belle's tone, that was not all. The boy responded positively and said that there was one more thing related to her that he wanted to ask him. Navari narrowed her eyes and told the young man that he should not speak in riddles and give his answer directly and clearly. The young man asked the girl not to look at him like that because it was a good deal for both of them. The young man raises his index finger and addresses the man by name, Blarney, saying that he wants to entrust him with the entire island. It is an uninhabited island, which is far from the capital. Now his friend's ship is there. Navari shouted that this has nothing to do with the church. The young man answered that it is something completely different. He said that the church's restoration work is being done by orphans and people from the slums, and when the construction is completed, they too will lose their jobs. The man said he understood and asked if this was the moment when the desert island came into play. He understands that the young man wants to use all these people to develop the island. Belle agrees and says that they can do whatever they want there. If they do it right, he is sure it will bring them a new source of income. Belle points to himself and says he will take care of the money and resources. Navari says her mind is starting to boil, and then she turns to her father, who has been silent all this time. The man says the word, "Abricht." Belle asks him again what it means. The man answers that he thinks that's what he'll call his island. In the language of the southern continent, it means harmony. Since they have permission to do whatever they want, they could build a full-fledged trading city. He decides to take a look, and first they need to build a port. He says that this may not happen in the near future, but does he know anyone who would like to trade with them? The man asks to introduce them better. The boy laughs, and the man asks if he said something inappropriate. The boy replies that he finds his energy impressive for his age, as expected of a former merchant adventurer. He is thinking about a trading partner. Bell says he has mermaid friends and asks the man what he thinks about it. He is surprised and asks again about mermaids, then says he is very interested and asks Bell to tell him a little more. After some time, the protagonist comes to the church and asks Takaru how they are doing here. The young man says that everything is great here and everyone is working hard, so he thinks they will finish in 2 or 3 days. Takaru then sees Navari and Blarney approaching them. Takaru asks if the man's body is completely fine. Blarney replies that his body is as good as it gets, and now he asks him to excuse him because he would like to inspect the church. Takeru asks Bell if everything really went smoothly. The young man asks again about smoothness and says that everything went better than ever. This old man was eager to swim to the island immediately. Then a girl comes into the room and asks everyone to stop working because dinner is ready. Then he suddenly sees Blarney in front of him and gets scared. The man apologizes to the girl. Bell turns to Karaya and says that this man will take care of them now. The man says that his name is Blarney and he is very pleased to meet the girl. She was silent for a moment, and then modestly said that she was also pleased to meet you and that her name was Karai. Blarney smiles and says that the girl does not need to be so nervous, because for him they will be more than just workers. From now on, they will all become a big family. The man strokes the girl's head, and she asks again about the family. Then more children appear. A younger girl approaches him and holds out a mug of hot liquid. She asks the man if he would like to have dinner with them. Blarney agrees and reaches for the mug. He then calls Navari to come with them. The girl agrees with her father. Takeru tells Bell that it looks like everything will be fine from now on. Bell agrees. He then looks at Navari, who is turned towards him. The girl approaches Tucker and Bell and asks if something happened to them. Navari tells Bell that he is a good person. The young man thanks the girl. Then Navari turns her head towards her father, who is talking to the children and says that it has been a long time since she saw him so happy. The girl is embarrassed and thanks Bella for everything with a smile. The young man smiles back and says that he doesn't deserve such gratitude. Then the children run to Navari and say that her father is calling the girl to have dinner together. Belle looks at the girl and thinks that she also looks happy. Takeru invites Belle to join him for dinner, and the boy agrees to his offer. The next day, the children walked and played in the churchyard. Belle comes out, greets everyone, and asks how they are doing. The church minister replies that everyone is happy with the new play area that appeared after the renovation. Then the girls come to Belle and ask where Blarney and the older sister Navari are. Belle says that they have just gone to the island of Abricht, so they are not here now. The girls said it was very sad. The young man scratches his head and apologizes to the girls. He says he will ask them to come another time. At that moment, Navari herself arrived. The girls noticed her arrival and, overjoyed, ran to her. Belle said that he thought that the girl had gone with Blarney to the island. The girl said that she had planned it, but she wanted to ask the boy something. Belle is surprised and asks if that is really the case. The girl wants Belle to make a magic ship for her. Belle is surprised and asks what the girl is talking about. Belle asks the girl why she wants to have a magical ship, especially since her father left his business. The girl confirms that this is why she wants to continue his business. Since his ship burned down, she would need a new one, so she looked for someone who could build her a new ship. Denko then told her that Belle would be the perfect person for this. The boy asked if it was really Denko. The girl agreed and said that he said that Belle could do it, that is, create a large ship with the help of magic. The young man said that Belle could do anything because he was simply amazing. The young man smiled and realized that this was in Denko's repertoire. He agreed and said that he would do it. Navari beamed with joy and said that she would help the young man in any way she could so the young man could rely on her. The young man agreed. Navari asks if they will go for materials right now. Belle denies and says that as long as he has some sand, or better yet, iron sand, he can easily make a model of the ship. A young man makes a model of a ship and gives it to a girl. She is amazed at the sight of it all. Navari asks if the boy can really do anything. Belle says that making a model is very simple. However, to make the ship move, some kind of power source will be needed. Navari guesses that the magic ships use magic and decides to look for the source of this magic, the magic stone. The young man agrees with her conclusions. Then she notices that she is very close to the boy. The girl turns away and blushes. Belle asks if there is a shop that sells magic stones in that case. Navari says they do, that is, but it will cost 3 gold coins. It is a small stone, like in a ring for example. Belle says that a ring is still a luxury item. Belle says that in any case, the girl shouldn't worry about the money, but they will need a bigger stone to power the ship. The girl says that the boy is absolutely right. Navari says that again, magical stones are usually used as decoration here in the capital, so she doesn't think they'll be able to find one big enough to fit an entire ship. Belle thinks that they have no choice but to visit every store in the capital. Navari suggests that they set out, and the young man agrees. After some time, the young man and woman go around many shops. Belle thinks that it looks like they really won't be able to find the big magic stone here. It looks like he has no other choice. He thinks that now is the time to fight the monsters and take their magic stones. The young man scratches his fists. He understands that everything has been decided and he can get down to business. Then a voice from the outside says that there is no need for this. Sani appears and says that the young man is really busy today. It seems that he is having a hard time. Belle says that the girl manages to be everywhere. So, since she is here, it means that she came to give him some information. The girl smirks and says that this time she will give the boy advice. Belle asks what advice the girl is talking about. Sani smiles and says that, however, the young man should not move from his place. The protagonist is surprised and does not understand what she is talking about. The young man asks to clarify what Sani meant. She replies that there is no point in delving into thoughts and reminds that until no one arrives, one cannot leave. Sani assures that the young man will find what he is looking for. Belle asks to wait. Belle is left alone and does not understand what kind of advice this is. Suddenly, someone calls Belle from the side. A young man approaches him and says that he has been looking for him all over the city. The boy tries to remember the man's name and then says that his name is definitely Legere. Legere says that he is glad that Belle finally remembered his name. Belle asks the young man what happened. Legere says that he heard that Belle is looking for a large magic stone to power the ship. He asks to give it to them. The company Baziwador will solve this issue. In fact, they have a good line of quality magic stones in stock. The young man asks if this is really so. Navari calls Belle and, noticing a man nearby, asks who he is. Belle introduces him as Legere, who is going to sell them a magic stone. Navari thanks Legere, but he modestly declines the gratitude. The man says that in that case, he asks to be allowed to take them to the store. After a while, Navari asks if this means that Belle is actually a good friend of Basivado. Legere says that, moreover, they get along well with each other. At that moment, Belle was walking behind them. Legere asks if he is right. Belle agrees and says that Basivado is quite an interesting person. However, to be honest, he did not expect Basivador to be so famous. Navari asks if the young man is serious. Navari says that Baziwador is the biggest trader in this country. There is no one here who does not know about him. Belle says that he is really that important. Navari says that Belle is really very strange. Suddenly, Legere notices something. At the same moment, objects from the side fly into the air. An object hits Legere and Navari gets scared, then calls the man by name. Then a barrel falls next to Navari and the girl gets scared, then grabs Belle. Belle clicks and then creates a dome around him and Navari. The young man thinks it's a tornado, but then doesn't understand why it appeared so suddenly. Then he sees a girl on the roof of the house. Navari asks if that is the princess. Belle is surprised. He thinks that this girl is a princess. So this is the girl who is said to have been chosen by God at the age of 10. Then the girl runs out of breath and screams that they can no longer hide. The hero princess has already punished all the bad guys who brought them nothing but trouble. All the people were perplexed, and then they began to thank the princess for saving them. Then Navari remembered Legere and asked how he was. Belle says that if you think about it, he was suddenly blown away somewhere. At this time, the girl lifted Legere's body and told Belle and Navari not to worry, because he simply lost consciousness. Belle and Navari are surprised when the girl introduces herself as Marie, Her Highness's personal bodyguard. She apologizes for the late introduction, asks for forgiveness, and leads Legere away. Belle says that the royal capital is indeed an interesting place. Navari agrees with the young man and then asks how they will get the magic stone now. Belle says that judging by Legere's condition, they will definitely not get it today. Then someone calls them from the side. Navari recognized her father's voice. The girl asked him why he was there. The man answered that it was because he wanted to give something to his daughter. He asks if the girl is really asking Belle to make her a ship, which is why he thought she would need a magic stone for that. So this sword will come in handy. Bell says he's sure the magic sword will be able to produce enough mana to power the ship. Navari asks, but didn't he remain in memory of his mother? The man says that everything is fine, and now the sword belongs to the girl. He is sure that his mother would be happy. The girl clutches the sword and thanks her father. She hands the sword to Bell and asks him to use his magic. Bell asks the girl if she is really sure. Still, it is quite a valuable thing. The girl says that she has already said that everything is fine. However, in return she asks him to try to make the best ship he can. The young man smiles. He throws the sword. He then coats the precious sword with his magic. Then he creates a huge ship. He says that it turned out something like this. The man was simply delighted. Bell said that it was nothing special. He made a ship that could effectively use the power of a magic sword. Bell asks Navari what she thinks and if she likes this ship. The girl agrees and says that she really likes it, and this ship is simply the best. The girl then starts patting Bell on the shoulder and asks what the ship looks like inside, so she offers him to take a look. Then the girl realizes what she is doing and moves away from the boy. Bell says that now it is her ship, so she can do whatever she wants with it, and also, she can decorate the inside as she likes. The girl agrees. The man notices the girl's shyness, then raises his finger and tells the girl not to worry, because her dad will always be rooting for her. The girl becomes even more shy, and Bell doesn't understand what they're talking about. The next morning, while Denko and Takaru were sleeping, Bell had already gone outside. A voice from the side wished Bell good morning. Bell spots Kyaja relaxing with the fairies on the roof and tells him that he woke up early. Kyaja asks where Bell is headed and is told that the boy is planning to visit Bosiwador. Kyaja supports this decision. The fairies called Bell and asked him to take care of himself. Then Bell takes off and sets off on his way. Kyaja turns to the fairies and says that it is time to prepare breakfast. The fairies gather to help the young man with the cooking. After a while, Bell was already walking through the streets of the city. He thinks that now that he thinks about it, he doesn't even know where Bosiwador lives. He might still be sailing, and he should have asked Ligir. If only he had some kind of GPS skill. He thinks about how he could go back and take one of the fairies with him. Suddenly, someone shouts at him from the side. It was the princess who told Bell that his appearance told her that he had a problem. Bell looked at the princess and thought that she was another oddball among his acquaintances. The girl says that she is a heroine princess, the same heroine who saves all the weak and defenseless people. The girl approaches the boy and asks if he needs help. Bell says that her help would not hurt him. In this case, he asks if the princess knows a man named Barvadin Baravader. He wants to meet him, but unfortunately, he doesn't even know where this man lives, the girl thinks. Then she racks her brain and asks for a moment. She seems to have heard the name somewhere. Then an idea comes to her mind, and the girl says that she remembers. She knows this man's shop, so she says she will show this shop to Bell. The young man asks if this is really so. Bell strokes the princess's head and says that he is counting on the girl. She laughs and says that she is being patted on the head. Bell thinks that even though the girl is a hero, she is only 10 years old, and she is the same age as Touta. The young man then notices someone watching them from afar. The girl shows a piece of paper that says her name is Marie, and she is Her Highness's bodyguard. Although Her Highness is still a child, she is still a royal person, so the young man should not touch the girl's body so casually next time. Otherwise, the young man may be beheaded. Bell is surprised by this. Then Marie starts writing something on a piece of paper. Bell realizes that she wants to tell him something else. For example, that this time she will allow him this impudence. Marie shows a piece of paper that says, Her Highness looks very cute. Bell thinks that although Marie likes cute girls, she is still a pureblood. The princess turns and asks Bell what is wrong and if there is something behind her. She turns to the pipe, but Marie has already disappeared. The girl says that it doesn't matter and asks the boy to follow her. She will show him the way to the store. Bell agrees with her. After some time, the princess says that they are already there. Seeing a large crowd, Bell notes the liveliness. The princess agrees. Bell thanks her, calling her a heroine, and hands her a bag of sweets as a token of appreciation. The girl is delighted by the many sweets and asks if she can share them. Bell approves, and Princess Marie, thanking the young man, flies away with the leaflet in her hands. Bell is left alone and thinks that with so many people he will have to wait for several hours. He decides to try to enter through the back door. The young man knocks on the back door. A girl opens the door for him. The girl apologizes and says that she never thought that there would be people here. The young man says that it is nothing to worry about and that it is his own fault. The girl then awkwardly tells the young man to go through the front door if he has business with the company. Then Laguerre notices them. The man says to the young man, "Welcome to the Bozziwador company." The young man greets Laguerre and says that he is glad to see that he is in perfect order. The girl asks if Belle is really the one rumored. Laguerre confirms it. The girl thanks Belle for fixing her father's ship, to which Belle asks who she means. The girl interrupts the man and asks for his forgiveness. She says that her name is Zanino and she is the daughter of Barvodan Bozziwador. The girl turns to Laguerre and says that she will take Belle into the house herself. The man agrees. After some time they drink tea. The girl says that his father has not been home since early morning, but she thinks that he will be back soon. The young man sees luxurious rooms, an elegant daughter, and well-dressed servants. This doesn't sound like the uncle he knows. Then he hears the girl wishing her father a welcome home. The man came in wearing shiny clothes and told Belle that he should have said he would come earlier. The young man was shocked by what he saw. The man asked the young man why he was looking like that and maybe something was wrong. Belle hesitated and replied that the man looked just like a nobleman. Bozziwador asked again about how he looked and said that he was a real nobleman. The man explains that his father is both a merchant and a nobleman who received the title of peer for his large investments in the country, although this title is more of an honorary nature. Then one of the houseworkers approached the man and asked his master if they should start preparing dinner. The man asked why it was already so late. The man thought about it and asked Belle about the same dish he had eaten at his house. He asks if he can cook it again. The young man agrees and says that it will take some time. The man admits that his request to his guests to cook the dish sounds strange, but he has long dreamed of tasting it again. Belle, understanding his persistence, agrees that the girl has no choice but to agree. Then he asks where their kitchen is. The girl agrees and asks the boy to follow her. She smiles and asks the boy to let her help the boy. The man is surprised, and his daughter says that the more people, the better. Bozziwador asks the girl not to be stupid. Belle worries about Zanino's safety, but she insists she is ready for housework. He wonders if her father is being overprotective, to which she replies that he simply loves her very much. After some time, they come to the kitchen. The girl asks the boy what she should do. Belle suggests that the girl cook guza, Bozziwador's favorite dish, but Zanino asks again about the name, as he is hearing about it for the first time. The girl is happy and tells Belle that she will prepare this dish. The boy then uses magic to create onions, potatoes, carrots, radishes, and other ingredients, and then they begin to speak together with Zanino. After some time, there were many dishes on the table. Bozziwador was happy with all these delicious delicacies. Belle said that they had prepared it all for everyone, so even the servants could join in the dinner. The male servant bowed and thanked the young man for his attention. Then Bozziwadora calls Zanino and says that she made the guza for him, so she asks the man to try it. He looks at the plate and asks if the girl really made it for him herself. The man begins to bless the dish that his daughter made especially for him. The girl told her father to start eating before everything gets cold. Belle told Bozziwador that his daughter was right, but he should eat slowly. Besides, he had already taught her the recipe so she could make it again. The man agreed with the boy. Then Bozziwador asks Belle why he was looking for him at all. The boy thinks about it and says that he probably wanted to see the man's face. Bozziwador laughed and said that the boy didn't even have a reason to visit. A few days later, Belle asks Takaru what he thinks about setting up a stall. Takaru looked at the boy emotionlessly and said that he was not going to help him with this. Belle asked if that was really true, because Takaru did not even hesitate with his answer. Takaru asked to be allowed to ask what Belle is planning to sell. Belle says he has a few things in mind, but he doesn't know what to choose. He snaps his fingers and asks Takaru which one is better. A huge number of objects appear in the air. Takaru is scared. Kaach comes up to them and asks Belle not to bother his captain. The protagonist laughs and apologizes. Belle then asks Kaach what he thinks would be the best to sell. The elf looks at the items carefully and thinks of something attractive. The young man understands that he needs to fill the counter with interesting products, otherwise customers will pass by. Kaach emphasizes that strange things can scare off customers, showing an unusual toy. Then Kure notices something. Belle asks what happened to the girl. She shows the pen and asks what it is for. The boy says it is called kanzashi. He says it is used for hair. Then he braids the girl's hair and pins it with the pin. Kare says that she has never seen such hair ornaments before. She understands that there is nothing like this anywhere in the capital. Belle notes this information. Takaru says that he doubts that these things exist in this world, things like kanzashi and kimono. Bell says that for a time in his village, these things were something abnormal. The other girls were saying that Karaya was very lucky and they were jealous of her. At that time, Bell was wondering if he had a few more hairpins in stock and whether he should try to sell them. After some time, he opened a shop with unusual goods and thought that it would not be so easy. People did not approach him. He thinks that it looks like customers are going to establish stores, so he can only wait patiently. Suddenly, the young man heard some rustling from the side. He sees a little fairy there, looking at Bell's interesting things. The young man said that she is one of the fairies. The girl reproaches Bell for being rude, reminding him that her name is Prish and that he should remember it. The young man apologizes. Then he asks why she came. Prish replies that she found the store interesting and that there were many beautiful things there. Bell realizes that fairies have individuality and offers to give the one who liked the clothes a few items. The fairy is hesitant because they are too big for her, but Bell reassures her. He says that he has doll dresses that his sister made. He thinks that they will suit the girl. Prish is happy and thanks Bell for his help. She says that she will try them all on right now. The young man asks the girl not to hurry. Then the main character is called out from the side and told that it is very funny to meet him here. It was Dariella and Balira. The girls greeted the young man and said that they had not seen him for a long time. Bell asked if they weren't with Zambari today. The girl answered positively and said that they had a day off. Then he said that meant Kayache had caused this boy trouble after all. Bell replied in the negative and said that he thought they were getting along just fine. And yet sometimes it is very pleasant to walk around the market, although it is a little difficult for them when you are recognized on every corner. Balira replied that it was not surprising because Dariella was so tall. Dariella asked Balira not to forget about his wings. Balira thought that everyone would recognize them. Suddenly he asked the girls to listen and asked if they would do him a favor. Dariella chuckled. Balira immediately warned that she would not do physical labor. Bell said that was not what he meant. Bell says he just wants girls to wear his clothes and walk around the market in them. Balira said that, in other words, Bell wanted them to be advertising models to attract clients. Bell agreed. Dariella laughed and said that Bell was seriously a very interesting guy. Balira asked Dariella to stop laughing. She apologizes to Bell and says that she is not interested in charity and then asks what they will get for it then. Bell was about to offer them one of her items to choose from, but Balira screamed that the young man was making fun of her. She suggested that he give them at least 2/3 of the sales or something else to make it worthwhile. Bell said that it was a complete ripoff, and Dariella tried to calm them down. Suddenly, the Princess Hero appeared and asked everyone to stop fighting, because fighting is bad. Then she stopped for a minute. The princess tells Belle that he is the same gentleman who gave her the candy. The young man greets the princess. He asks if she is really patrolling the streets again. He thanks the girl for her concern. Then the girl said, pointing to Dariella and Balira, that these ladies are also here. She asked if these girls are from the Red Thunder. Dariella says that they are honored that the princess remembered their names. Then the princess asks to tell why they fought. The girl was told the whole gist of the argument, and she suddenly beamed with delight. The princess said that the advertising model sounded very interesting, and she wanted one too. The princess invites Balira to be advertising models together. Dariella said that if it is a direct invitation from Her Highness, then they cannot refuse it. Balira said that she understood. However, she would like to have some sweets once they finish. That would be their reward. Belle agreed. The fairy appears in a beautiful new dress and asks if everything is okay. The princess comments on her cute appearance, and Balira jokes about her unusual fairy friend. Belle suggests that the fairy become a model for an advertisement with the girls. Prish was surprised and said that she didn't even know. The princess came up to her and said that everything would be fine and she would be by her side. She says that, besides, the girl is already so well dressed, it would be a waste not to show it to others. Prish agrees. After some time, the girls went for a walk. Everyone around noticed the princess and her very beautiful dress. Then they also noticed Balira from the Red Thunder next to Her Highness, as well as Dariella. The little children greeted the fairy, who was sitting on Dariella's head at the time. Prish smiled sweetly and waved her hand. After a while, Belle said that the girls did a great job and it was a real success. He gives them sweets and says that these cookies are very tasty. However, he says the girls are a bit over the top. Balira says, "Isn't it great when your store is thriving?" Then Balira said that they would see each other again. Dariella thanked Belle for the sweets. The Princess Hero also went and told Belle that they would meet again. Bell asked them to stop for a moment, then looked out at the huge crowd of people and wondered if he would really be serving them all by himself. Then Prish calls him and says that she will help him with his work and offers to do everything together. Bell thanks the girl for her help. The fairy agrees. After some time of trading, the young man gave the customer change in the form of 3 bronze coins. The boy thanks the girl for her purchase. Then Prish sighs and says that they are finally done. Bell says that it was a good job and the girl helped her out. There was a sign on the window that all the goods were sold out. The girl admits that she was afraid the fight would never end. Bell apologizes, citing the desire to make money, which got him carried away. Suddenly, Prish's stomach rumbles and she notices that she now wants a snack. Bell agrees, noting that it is almost noon. Once they have cleaned up here, the young man invites Prish to go and eat something. He asks if the girl wants to go somewhere. Prish takes off and says she would like to try the market food. Bell agrees. After some time, he and Prish are walking around the market. The young man bought himself and the fairy a small portion of fried meat. After some time, they also took a portion of vegetable salad. Then the girl notices some beautiful berries and tells Bell that she wants to try them. The young man says that the girl eats too much and where does she put so much in her? The girl says she always has room for dessert. Bell agrees with her. Then he turns and notices something. He continues walking and feels a man in a cloak following him. Bell turns a corner. Prish asks him if something is wrong. The boy scratches his head and says he thought it was just his imagination. However, it seems that someone is following them. Prish is surprised by this information. The girl asks if the mafia might be targeting them again, but Bell replies that it doesn't look like it. The mafia problem has already been solved thanks to a retired man. Suddenly, Prish sees a man in a cloak running into the same alley he and Bell had turned into. Prish says that the man is coming towards him fast. Bell stands still and watches the approaching figure, then takes a swing. He creates a wall right in front of his pursuer. He then turns around and says that now they will lose him. Prish agrees. However, suddenly this man jumps right along the walls of the houses in this alley. The hood falls off the pursuer's head and Bell sees that it is a girl with dark hair. Prish was surprised that it was a woman. The girl said that Bell was quite good-looking. Suddenly, a voice came from behind telling the girl named Saline to stop all this. Suddenly, a man appeared who thought that the girl was doing whatever she wanted. Saline called the man a master. Suddenly, Bell raised his hand in front of his face and asked if this man was really the girl's boss. The man started yelling at Bell to wait a second and say that he didn't want to fight him. Bell asks why they were following him. The man says he got curious when he heard about the man with the fairy, so he looked for them. The man says his name is Shantar, and he is a merchant from the eastern continent. Then he points to the girl and says that she is his assistant, whose name is Celine. The girl apologizes for the attack, explaining that she wanted to test the boy's strength. Bell wonders why she attacked them for this reason. Shantar. He says that Selena is such a rascal. He points his finger at the girl's face and she says that the master is annoying her. Suddenly, Prish says that they look like good people. Saline kicks the master's hand away and tells him to finally start talking about the main thing. The man agrees. Then the man begins to stutter. He extends his hand to Bell and says that he wants to be friends with him. He asks how about that. It sounds very good. Selena told the man to start talking about business. Bell thought that the man's level of calm was alarming. The man says that since he has something else to talk about, he will show his ship. He wants to ask the boy's name. The protagonist says that his name is Bell and the fairy's name is Prish. The girl says that she is very pleased to meet Shantar and Celine. Celine reciprocates and says that Prish is very nice. After some time, Bell, Shantar, Celine, and Prish come to Shantar and Celine's ship. Bell says that the ship looks unusual and are all ships from the east like that? Shantar replies that he thinks they are all so colorful. He made his ship to look like an amulet. Bell says that the people from the east are very religious. However, to own a ship at such an age, Shantar must have a decent amount of money. They are interrupted by Celine, who tells Mr. Bell that this is the ship of her master's older brother. Moreover, it was taken without permission. Shantar begins to cover his face with his hands. He says he can't go to his brother who never lends anything. Bell thinks Shantae is very serious. Shantar says that he didn't just come here without thinking. He shows the boy a huge pile of boxes. Prish replies that there are many boxes here and then asks what is in them. Shantar replies that the boxes contain goods that can only be found in the east. If he can sell them, his brother will finally acknowledge him. Bell asks that they are all of very good quality. He twists a tea leaf in his hands. Celine says that at least the master thinks otherwise. But at this rate, he won't make a profit. Bell wonders if this is possible because of his personality. At this time, Prish turns to Chanter and asks what is going on there. The man says it is a non-perishable food called bamanov. It is fried and is very tasty. Prish asks if this is true and says that there are many unusual things in the East. The young man takes one of the bags and thinks that he has seen this somewhere before and then realizes that it is a cut mochi. To think that he will encounter it in this world. Bell asks Chanter how much of this bayman he has in total. Chanter says he has enough to sell and for emergency food, he thinks about 6 boxes. Bell says that in that case, could Chanter sell him all the boxes? And then he asks to wait a second and says that he wants more of these tea leaves, and he is also interested in these spices. He agrees and says that he wants to buy all the goods. Chanter was incredibly surprised. The young man then creates 5 gold bars and says, "How about this, and will it be enough?" Chanter is shocked when he sees the gold bars. Bell asks if it could be that there aren't enough. Bell says that only his judgment has value. Chanter reaches for the ingots but is stopped by Celine, who asks the master to wait. The girl turns to Master Bell and says that his conditions are very favorable, but they cannot sell them all the goods. Chanter asks why they can't sell everything. Celine says that it is very important for a business to have high profits, but personal relationships should also be respected. She asks the master to think about it. If he sells all the goods only to Bell, then he will not spread throughout the capital. And all because the man will not have personal relationships with other traders. Moreover, he will not be able to gain any experience. Won't business in the capital become even more difficult at this rate? She asks if this is normal. Chanter says, probably not. Celine says that if that's the case, he needs to be careful about it. The girl apologizes to Bell and says that she has not shown herself in the best light. Bell says that everything is fine. It is natural for a merchant to worry about his connections with people. He asks them to be sure that he will definitely tell about Chanter, because he has many friends in the capital. The man asks if this is really true. He thanks Bell and says that he doesn't even know how to thank him. He says that now he can go back to his brother. Bell wishes Chanter success in this matter and not to cause too many problems for Selena. Chanter says he'll try, but Celine sighs and says he's hopeless. It was already late at night when Bell told everyone in the church what had happened. Takeru said that it was because of what had happened that they were now having mochi, or bayman, for dinner. Bell agreed. He says that since it has soy sauce and sugar, it will be absolutely delicious. It brings back fond memories of him always eating it on New Year's. Then Bella calls Prish and points to other fairies who also want such clothes. The fairies rejoiced and asked the young man about it. Koch told the captain that the dish was ready. Takeru thanked him for his help. Suddenly Bell turned to the elf and told him to be careful when eating the dish. Koch asked why. To which the young man replied that it could get stuck in the throat of long-lived people, and Kayaje was about 100 years old. The elf said that bayman was a very scary food, but Bell tried to correct the situation and said that he was sure that if the elf chewed it, everything would be fine. One morning in the churchyard, one of the girls was crying. The other girls were yelling at the boys that they had been thinking about it for a long time, but boys really are rude and the worst creatures in the world. Others tried to stop the argument and asked everyone to calm down. Karai was one of them. The other girls asked if she was really going to side with the boys, but the girl replied that she didn't mean that. Bell and Prish stood and watched, because they did not understand what was happening. Suddenly, Navari appeared. The girl said that Bell had finally arrived, and the young man asked her what had happened to the children. Navari began to stutter. The girl said that she was braiding the girl's hair, but suddenly a boy came up and said that he didn't understand girls and that they really had so much fun playing with their hair. The girl said that even boys needed to take care of their hair. She reached for the boy's hair, but he pushed her and shouted at her not to touch him, and also called the girl names. Navari said that later everything escalated to tears and screams. Bell says that it has always been like this, and even the sisters have a hard time with them. Then Navari said that the boy who hit her peer has been silent since then. Bell said he would go and talk to him. Boys find it easier to talk to each other than to girls. Navari agrees. He asks Prish to go with Navari, as her healing magic might come in handy. The fairy agrees. Then Bell comes to the boy and he says that he didn't mean to make the girl cry. The boy asks why he hit her then. The boy said that she was always there when she tried to touch his hair, and then suddenly they rarely played and he doesn't know because he got bored and angry. Bell realized that this was the reason. He did it with a clear conscience, but apparently giving things only to girls was a bad idea, so he was the reason for the fight. The young man felt guilty. He said he would think of a way to get all the children to play together again. However, the boy must apologize to the girl. He agrees and shakes his head. Bell then whispers in his ear that he should learn from this and be gentle with the one he likes. The boy got embarrassed and said that it was not like that at all. At that time, Prish told Bell to take it seriously. Bell said that everything was fine and he was serious about it. He says that since he and Prish are done, does the girl know where the toy store is? After some time, the young man looked at many toys. Prish asked that if the boy wanted to make a gift for the children, then why did they come to the toy store? The boy could have just made them appear out of thin air, like he always does, or even used that special sand. Bell replied that he could certainly do that. But his idea of toys is rather vague. If he doesn't have a blueprint in his head when he uses magic to create things, then he can't make something come true. Prish is surprised that the young man, who knows the blueprints of complex ships, cannot make a simple soft toy. Bell asks not to criticize, believing that in his past life the young man had little contact with children and learned about ships from TV shows. Even if he remembers his childhood, how many years should he go back? Suddenly he saw a bat on the display case. He thought that it was a baseball bat, and why was it in such a place? Suddenly the door of the store opened and a girl addressed the young man. She apologized and asked if he was really interested in her goods. Bell asked if the girl really did it. She agreed and said that if the boy was interested, he could go to her store because she had many other things. Bell thought that such a bat should not exist in this world, and could it? That this girl had also been reborn. He had to find out. Prish asked Bell to wait and said that now was not the time for unnecessary walks because he needed to find gifts for the children. Bell says that since he is curious, he will go and have a look at the shop. Prish asks him to wait. She cursed this free spirit of the young man. Bell walked into the shop and was greeted by a girl. She said she hadn't introduced herself yet and then said her name was Celine. She was the owner of the shop and a carpenter. She said that the little fairy had named him Bell. The young man agreed and said that he was very pleased to meet her. The girl said that she was very happy because she had not had clients for a long time. Bell asked what it was even though she had so many good things. The girl replied that when it comes to her creations, the design is good, but people say that they are not strong enough as weapons, like this bat. She said that the regular ones were much stronger, but they weren't as beautiful, so she wanted a beautiful, smooth, and flawless model. In that case, she has achieved this beautiful form. She is surprised and says that her talent frightens her. Bell realized that the girl is not reborn. She says that, however, it is sad. After all, the residents of the capital do not understand this art. If everything continues like this, the store will have to close. Bell calls the girl by name and says that he has a proposal for her. He invites her to move to her village. If the store continues to be useless, he would like to change it a little. The girl thanks the boy for his concern, but she is interested in the reason for all this. Bell says he found it sad that her talent was not noticed. He thinks the girl is an amazing artist. Then Celine comes up, takes the boy by the hands, and says that in other words, Bell has become her fan. The young man says that it is not quite that, but he thinks that it is something like this. The girl agrees and says that if this is the desire of the admirer, then she must obey. She then asks if the young man is really going to take her home like this. She says that if he wants, they can go right now. Bell says it's not worth it, because he's not in such a hurry. He has some preparations to make before taking her to the village, so she should prepare herself. Bell says he wants to take the bat and asks how much it costs. The girl says he can take it, but just so he knows it's not the best weapon. Bell says he gets it, but he wants to use it to mend friendships. After a while, the boy threw the ball, and the girl with the bat tried to receive it. Suddenly, she hit the ball, and everyone thought it was very cool. Then the girl turned to Bell and asked what she should do now. Bell told her to drop the bat and run to the first point. The girl started shaking her head because she didn't understand where she should run. Then the boy she had recently had a fight with grabbed her hand and told her she needed to run that way. Navari was happy that everyone had finally calmed down and was playing together. Bell said he was glad they were enjoying the game. Navari was surprised to hear the young man compare it to baseball and admitted that she found the rules of the game complicated. The young man assured her that everything would become easier if she mastered the basics and offered to teach her, holding out his hand. Bell asked what was wrong, and Navari replied that he was just too close. Suddenly, Celine appeared and asked the boy what he was using the bat for, as it looked interesting. Belle asked Celine why she was there. The girl replied that she was curious about why the boy needed the bat, so she came. However, he continues to surprise her. Her interest in the young man increased significantly. Belle thanked the girl. Navari asked Belle to come to her, because he promised to teach her baseball. The young man apologized and said that he was already on his way, but Celine also asked him to teach her.